Chapter 406. The gate of the Demon Emperor Palace was closed. The entire first floor was eerily silent. At the end of the hall, there seemed to be something that made Li Mu's hair stand on end. Li Mu tried to open the gate of the Demon Emperor Palace. However, he realized that even if he used the great strength technique, he could not move the gate at all. He tried a few more spells but to no avail. In order to conserve his magic power, Li Mu quickly gave up on trying. At this moment, Illusion Princess had already flown to his side. She looked at the tightly shut gate of the Demon Emperor Palace and asked in shock, "Why is the gate here closed?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "When I came down, the gate closed by itself." Illusion Princess went forward and tried to push it a few times. However, the stone gate was extremely thick. After it closed, it became one with the Demon Emperor Palace. It was not something that could be moved with brute force. Illusion Princess was still trying. Li Mu said indifferently, "Save it. Save some magic power. Who knows what will happen later." Illusion Princess looked back at him and said coldly, "It's none of your business." Li Mu was too lazy to care about her. The life and death of this demonic which had nothing to do with him. However, everyone was trapped in this strange Demon Emperor Palace. They were like grasshoppers on a rope. Preserving her strength was the same as preserving his own strength. Although Illusion Princess had a bad attitude towards Li Mu, compared to those demons she was clearly smarter. After Li Mu's reminder, she did not try to open the gate again. In this short period of time, everyone in the chaotic battle realized that something was wrong and stopped. What's going on? Why is the gate here closed? Who did it? Li Mu looked at the consecrators and elders of the six sects and said, "Everyone look around. See if there are any other exits. 10 people in a group. Do not scatter." Illusion Princess also ordered the demonic cultivators to look for other exits. At this moment, everyone realized that the entire Demon Emperor Palace only had one exit. There were no windows on the 3 floors. The reason why the hall was so bright was because of the glowing pearl on the ceiling. What is this?" A woman from Meizong sect could not help but exclaim when she saw something on the ground in the hall on the first floor. Everyone looked over and saw the corpse of a giant wolf. In the battle earlier, a wolf demon and a leopard demon had lost their physical bodies, leaving only their demon souls behind. At this moment, their demon bodies had lost all their flesh and blood for some unknown reason. They had turned into dried corpses that were only skin and bones. They looked ferocious and terrifying. To the people in the hall, the dried corpses and zombies were not scary. What was scary was that they did not know the reason why the 2 demonic corpses had become like this. The unknown was always the scariest. Not only did the 2 demonic corpses change, even the bloodstains on the ground disappeared without a trace. At this time, the Fulu school elders and a few consecrators of the imperial court were looking for an exit. They had already reached the back of the palace hall. One of the consecrators raised his head and looked. He couldn't help but be shocked. What is this? Behind the wooden shelves was a blood-red coffin. The coffin was 1 zhang long and half a zhang wide. It was completely blood-colored, and as soon as Zhou Xian walked in, the stench of blood assaulted his nostrils. Because it was hidden behind the wooden shelves, no one had noticed it earlier. Soon the crowd gathered around him. Why is there a coffin here? Could it be that the Lord Demon Emperor is inside this coffin? But why is the coffin blood-colored? Could it be that all the flesh and blood here has been absorbed by this coffin? As everyone surrounded the coffin and discussed endlessly, Li Mu silently retreated to the back of the crowd. In the next moment, a weak golden light flew out from the 3rd floor of the palace hall and flew into Li Mu's sleeve without anyone noticing. Then he raised his head and looked at the coffin in front of him. This coffin was full of oddities. It could even actively absorb the blood of the Demon Emperor Palace. Li Mu wouldn't believe that this was a normal situation even if he was beaten to death. Thinking of the resurrected demonic corpses outside, Li Mu suddenly had a bold guess. Just as this thought appeared in his mind, the blood-colored coffin suddenly shone with a bright red light and exploded with a strong suction force. The 2 demonic bears closest to the coffin were almost sucked into it. They had to use all their strength to stabilize their bodies. However, the 2 demonic wolves and leopard demonic beasts that didn't have their demonic bodies and only had their demonic souls left were not so lucky. They were sucked into the blood coffin along with the ghost cultivator from the soul sect whose cultivation had dropped. After their souls touched the blood coffin, They entered it without any hindrance. Then the suction force on the blood coffin disappeared and there was no more sound from the coffin. However, the blood-colored coffin was rapidly fading away. Soon the entire coffin became sparkling and translucent like jade. However, it was even more terrifying in the hearts of the crowd. Seeing this strange scene with their own eyes, everyone quickly retreated, wanting to get as far away from the stone coffin as possible. Creak! An ear-piercing sound of rubbing stones suddenly rang in everyone's ears. The lid of the stone coffin slid down little by little. When it was halfway down, it suddenly flew to one side. A figure flew out from the stone coffin and floated above the stone coffin. That figure was very tall but not burly. In fact, it was just a layer of skin wrapped around bones. His eye sockets were sunken and his eyeballs were withered. The few strands of hair on his head even looked a little comical. However, none of the people present were able to laugh. This was because its body was emitting a strong corpse aura. It was stronger than any of the demonic corpses they had encountered along the way. Li Mu cursed in his heart when he sensed the powerful aura on this corpse. If this corpse that suddenly jumped out didn't have a cultivation level above the 6th realm, he would have chopped its head off and kicked it like a ball. Who said that this space couldn't have 6th realm cultivators? Wasn't this a scam? Her. Then he remembered that it was the Empress who had said that. He silently swallowed the words he was about to say. After the zombie in the coffin flew out of the stone coffin, it quietly floated in the air looking a little dazed. A zombie that had just been formed didn't have any spiritual intelligence. It only had instincts. After floating quietly for a moment, its nose suddenly twitched a few times. Even if it didn't have any spiritual intelligence, it instinctively sensed that there was something it needed here. It inhaled sharply again. A wolf demon and a leopard demon suddenly flew forward. After a moment of shock, the two demons roared angrily. Their bodies suddenly changed. One turned into a human with a wolf's head and the other a leopard's head. Their arms also became several times thicker. Hair as hard as steel needles grew. Sharp claws that could cut through metal and stone pierced towards the zombie's chest and head. Clang, clang. Their claws collided with the zombie's body. Immediately, sparks flew. After two crisp sounds, the two demons' sharp nails broke and their claws bent. The zombie grabbed their necks and flew back into the coffin. The coffin lid automatically flew up and closed. This scene seemed to take a long time, but it was actually just a short moment. It wasn't until the two demons were caught into the coffin that everyone in the hall finally reacted. At this moment, whether it was the Dao sect or the demon sect, all the demons took out their Dharma treasures and cast spells to attack the stone coffin. Although there were still grudges and disputes between them, the most important thing now was to destroy this powerful demon corpse. However, no one knew what material the stone coffin was made of. Under the attacks of the Dharma treasures, only shallow scratches were left on it. All kinds of spells couldn't cause too much damage to it. After the stone coffin shook for a while, the lid flew out again. The wolf demon and leopard demon were also thrown out. At this moment, their bodies were all skin and bones. Their flesh and blood had disappeared. Even their demon souls were gone. The zombie flew out of the coffin again. At this moment, his skin was more lustrous than before. His eyes were also more lively than before. His eyes flickered as if he was thinking. This scene shocked everyone. It took a long time for a zombie to develop spiritual intelligence. It was the same for the corpse of a powerhouse. No matter what realm a powerhouse was in, their spirit was entrusted to their soul. When the primordial spirit dissipated, what was left was only a body. Even if the body became a spirit, it didn't have the original memories. This zombie actually gained the ability to think in such a short period of time. Perhaps it had something to do with the few souls he devoured. What made them even more shocked was that after devouring two more demons, there seemed to be some flesh and blood on the zombie's body. Its figure also became taller and more imposing. It looked extremely similar to the huge statue at the entrance of the demon palace. Everyone could not help but have a crazy thought in their minds. Could this zombie be the corpse of a demon emperor? P.S. My hand still hurts. I'll have to get used to writing with my voice for a while. Chapter 407. On the first floor of the demon palace. The zombie's eyes were already moving. It scanned the crowd, emitting a bloodthirsty aura. Li Mu had seen many zombies. From walking zombies, jumping zombies to flying zombies, he had fought many of them. The one in front of him was undoubtedly the strongest zombie he had ever seen. After 3,000 years, The corpse was already at the sixth realm when it had just become a corpse. How powerful must the owner of this corpse have been when he was alive? Li Mu was already suspecting whether this was the corpse of the demon emperor Bai Di. At that time he did not dare to confirm. After all, most cultivators would not leave behind a corpse after death. Before their lifespan ended, most of them would choose to self-destruct and return everything to the dust. Although the physical body could still exist after the spirit dissipated, it was already a different creature from the original body. Once it became a corpse, it would bring disaster to the human world. When people died and destroyed their corpses, they were responsible for others and also responsible for themselves. How could the demon emperor not understand this principle? However, after this corpse swallowed the two fifth-level demons, its body became plump and it vaguely resembled a human. Its face was vaguely recognizable, and it looked similar to the statues outside the demon emperor palace. Li Mu had no choice but to believe it. The demon corpses outside the demon palace and the corpses in the stone coffins inside the palace all proved this point. Li Mu even suspected that the demon corpses were purposely left behind by someone. His goal was to deplete the spiritual power of those who entered here. In fact, to clear the demon corpses, their fulu elixirs and spiritual jades were almost depleted. The great battle in the demon palace had also depleted much of their spiritual power. Now that he thought about it, the treasures placed in the demonic emperor palace were more like bait than the inheritance that the white emperor had given to the younger generation of the demonic emperor. They were tempted to kill each other so that the stone coffin would absorb their flesh and blood and awaken the sleeping corpses. If everything was as Li Mu guessed, then Emperor Bai was not a great demon with a demon heart, but an old silver coin from 3,000 years ago. Li Mu could not understand what Emperor Bai was after. Even if his corpse was resurrected, it wouldn't be him anymore. He had sacrificed so many of his subordinates to set up such a trap. What good would it do him? The demon race respected him as the demon emperor. For the past 3,000 years they had been searching for his cave. However, after they went through all kinds of hardships and entered the demon emperor's cave, they met a group of dumplings the moment they landed. In the demon emperor's palace, there was even a super invincible dumpling waiting for them. This was a method of harming others without benefiting oneself. Anyone with a little bit of humanity and demonic nature would not do such a thing. All kinds of evidence proved that Demon Emperor Bai Di was most likely a lunatic with an antisocial personality. No matter how powerful he was when he was alive, he was now just a corpse without any humanity. After tasting flesh and blood, his ferocious nature was aroused. He let out a low roar and disappeared on the spot. Bang! A bear demon lowered his head and looked at his chest. A skinny claw reached out from his chest and grabbed a beating heart. The corpse only took a light breath, and this bear demon's blood essence and demon soul were sucked into his mouth. The remaining demons and demon sect members started to attack the gate of the demon emperor's palace frantically. In this small demon emperor's palace they were like turtles in a jar. Sooner or later they would become food for this demon corpse. This corpse was too powerful. Fifth realm demons could not fight back at all in his hands and had their souls and blood essence sucked away. If they continued to be trapped here they would soon meet the same end. A few of the imperial court's high priests and disciples of the six sects gathered around Li Mu. Although a sixth realm demon was powerful, he was just a corpse and could not be a match for everyone here. However, this demon emperor's palace was too small and could not be used fully. It would be easy for this corpse to kill them one by one. If he hid in the coffin again, so many people could not do anything to him. They had to think of a way to escape first. Li Mu said decisively to everyone, "Everyone attack this gate with all your might." Although everyone had tried to attack together just now, they were not forced to such an extent. Everyone was scheming against each other and did not want to expend too much of their magic power. Once their magic power was exhausted, all their previous efforts would easily go to others. However, things were different now. If they did not do their best now, they would lose their lives later. Regardless of whether it was the demons or the demon sect, they were all attacking this gate with all their might. Rumble. Under the full attack of dozens of fifth realm powerhouses, the tightly shut gate of the demon emperor's palace finally shook. Dozens of brilliant spells flashed. A golden light flew out from Li Mu's sleeve and crashed into the gate of the demon emperor's palace. Rumble. The two gates of the demon emperor's palace collapsed. As if they had seen the dawn of hope, everyone in the palace flew out of the palace and came to the square in front of the demon emperor's palace. At this moment, the zombie in the Demon Emperor's palace had also finished absorbing the blood essence and soul of the bear demon. At this moment his skin was even more lustrous. He no longer looked like a bag of bones and his body had also become more plump. He licked his white fangs and the bloodthirst in his eyes became even more intense. He slowly flew out of the palace. On the square, the various forces did not have a prior agreement. However, they all had a tacit understanding to work together to kill this zombie. As soon as the zombie flew out, dozens of magical lights landed on its body. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the six sects, the demon sect, or the subordinates of the demon kings, they all only had one goal: kill this zombie. Unfortunately, along the way their Fulu elixirs, formation flags, and other powerful one-time use treasures had long been used up on those demon corpses. After the battle in the Demon Emperor's palace and the destruction of the gate, most of the magic power in their bodies had been used up. The power of the spells that they could use now was also weakened by more than half. Even so, the simultaneous attack of dozens of Fifth Realm powerhouses had the power to destroy heaven and earth. The zombie's body was instantly covered by the light of the dozens of spells. Even if everyone's dermic powers were almost depleted, even if the power of their dermic spells was not as strong as before, even if the demonic corpse had the strength of a Sixth Realm cultivator, when dozens of Fifth Realm cultivators joined forces, even a true Sixth Realm cultivator would have to retreat. Boom. The ground shook violently. The aftershock of the spells caused everyone to take a few steps back. When the dust settled, the zombie's clothes had already been torn into shreds. He leaned against the stone tablet in front of the Demon Emperor's palace. His aura was extremely weak and there was not much corpse aura left on his body. Even an ordinary Sixth Realm powerhouse would have a high chance of dying after receiving such an attack. However, this zombie still had a breath of life left. However, there was nothing to be afraid of. At this moment, a bear demon finally could not hold it in any longer. He roared and charged forward. He said furiously, "Give me back my brother's life." Suddenly, a beam of light flashed across the huge statue at the entrance of the Demon Emperor's palace. A blinding ball of light flew out from the statue and rapidly flew into the zombie's body. The bear demon's expression changed and he stopped abruptly in his tracks. However, after the ball of light flew into the zombie's body, there were no obvious changes to him. His eyes, which were already somewhat lively, fell into confusion instead. The bear demon gritted his teeth and raised a huge wolf fang club in his hand. He smashed it viciously at the zombie's head. However, in the next instant he lowered his head and looked on helplessly as a withered hand pierced through his chest and ruthlessly crushed his still-beating heart. The bear demon's blood essence and demon soul were sucked into the zombie's mouth. This scene shocked the others who were watching from afar. The group's combined attack just now could even kill a Sixth Realm powerhouse. What kind of divine being was this zombie? It clearly only had a breath of life left, but it could still kill the bear demon in such a way. At this moment, everyone even felt that it was impossible to defeat this zombie. The only remaining wolf demon was already on the verge of breaking down. He looked at the zombie from afar and said in a trembling voice, "What kind of thing are you?" After the zombie swallowed the bear demon's blood essence and soul, his flesh and blood grew a little. He already looked somewhat like a human. The confusion in his eyes gradually disappeared. He stood in front of the Demon Emperor's palace and spoke for the first time. "I am Emperor Bai." Chapter 408. Everyone turned pale with fright at the zombie's words. The White Emperor was the sovereign of the demon race. He had passed down the teachings of the demon race and led the demon race to greater heights. He was the faith of many demon races. How could he be a demon that slaughtered them? The demon race could not believe it and could not accept it. Li Mu looked at the zombie with a puzzled expression. A zombie that had just gained consciousness was a new entity. It did not have any memories, nor did it know any language. It needed some time to learn before it could communicate with others. For example, Su He's corpse. When she was born, she could only sense the connection with Su He and still acted on instinct. Her true intelligence was not much higher than a 3-year-old child's, and she did not know any language. She still needed to observe and learn in the future. Under normal circumstances, this demon race would not know about the White Emperor, much less have such clear thoughts. Thinking of the ball of light that flew out of the statue, Li Mu's eyes narrowed. He asked, "You obtained the White Emperor's memories?" The zombie did not seem to be afraid to talk about this with Li Mu. It nodded. You are very smart. For a moment, Li Mu didn't know what was in front of him. If he said he was the Demon Emperor White Emperor, he had already fallen 3,000 years ago. The zombie in front of him only had the White Emperor's body and memories. It was not the White Emperor from 3,000 years ago. But if he said he was not the White Emperor, his body was the White Emperor's body, and his memories were also the White Emperor's memories. If this was not the White Emperor, then who was? Li Mu felt that he had encountered a philosophical problem. When a person died and their memories were transplanted to a new body, was it a new life or a continuation of the original life? No, impossible. The Demon Emperor died long ago. You can't be the Demon Emperor. Don't think you can fool us. Although the Demon Emperor was powerful, he could not have lived for more than 3,000 years. If Li Mu was having a headache, the demon race present were already going crazy. How could they accept the rebirth of the Demon Emperor from 3,000 years ago and the massacre of the demon clan? After the ball of light entered his body, the bloodthirsty aura disappeared from the zombie's body. After hearing the words of the demons, he was silent for a moment before muttering, "So it has already been 3,000 years." After saying this, he once again fell into a long silence. Li Mu could understand his feelings. The zombie had just been born. Although it already had self-awareness, it was a blank consciousness. After he had obtained Emperor Bai's memories, the emptiness in his consciousness had been filled by Emperor Bai's memories and experiences. His body and memories were all Emperor Bai's. In a way, he was Emperor Bai. However, Emperor Bai's memories were just memories. Memories had no consciousness and he could not feel the passage of time. To the zombie that believed itself to be the White Emperor, this meant that it had only slept for a short while. When it opened its eyes, 3,000 years had already passed. Normal people might not be able to accept such a reality. Emperor Bai was indeed the Demon Emperor. He had once been a supreme expert. After a short moment of confusion, his eyes regained clarity and his expression gradually calmed down. He looked at Li Mu and asked, "Which is the most powerful country on the Zhou continent now? Is it still the Chu dynasty? How many generations have they passed down?" Li Mu looked at him and said calmly, "The Chu dynasty has been gone for 2,500 years. In these 2,500 years, the central mainland has changed 3 dynasties. Now the most powerful dynasty on the Zhou continent is called the Great Zhou." Emperor Bai's face showed a look of reminiscence. He muttered, "So those old guys from the Chu dynasty are also dead?" Li Mu nodded and said, "They've been dead for almost 3,000 years. His gaze swept across the crowd one by one and he said to himself, "Which sect do you belong to?" Facing the Demon Emperor from 3,000 years ago, the elders of the 6 sects did not dare to slight him. Fulu School of Taoism, Danding Sect of Taoism, Xuanzong of Taoism, Northern Sect of Taoism. Emperor Bai pondered for a while and shook his head. Never heard of it. Taoism was born less than 2,000 years ago. It was normal that Emperor Bai had not heard of it. His eyes continued to wander. When he glanced at the people of Diabolism, he paused for a moment and said, "Are you from Diabolism?" The people of Diabolism bowed and said respectfully, "Greetings, Senior Emperor Bai." Emperor Bai finally looked at the few remaining demons and said, "Are you doubting my identity?" The demon race had always been stubborn. A bear demon gritted his teeth and said, "Even a demon emperor can't live for more than 3,000 years. Who the hell are you? How dare you pretend to be a demon emperor?" Emperor Bai glanced at him and said, "It's been 3,000 years. Your shaking bear clan is still as stupid as before. If I had known, I wouldn't have taught you demonic techniques back then. I would have let you all be beasts for all eternity." Perhaps because no one had spoken for 3,000 years, Emperor Bai was different from those experts who like to put on airs. He was not stingy with his words. At first he stuttered a little, but soon his speech became smoother and clearer. He stood in front of the huge statue and said slowly, "That's right. Even I can't defeat the heavenly Tao. My lifespan is only 300 years. A melancholy expression appeared on his face as he continued, "But I can't accept it. I've cultivated for 300 years, 290 years and obtained countless opportunities. It wasn't easy for me to cultivate to the heavenly demon realm. But my lifespan is only left with 10 years. I've tried countless methods but I couldn't change it. I could only seal my body in a coffin before my lifespan ran out. I sealed my life's memories in a stone statue and left them for future rebirth. In this way I could have a few hundred more years of lifespan. Li Mu's mouth opened slightly. He was stunned. Was he fighting a bug with the heavenly Tao? Lifespan was related to one's soul. Once the 300-year limit was up, even if he was reborn like the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master, it would be useless. When the time came his soul would still die. But the body was different. As long as it was preserved properly the body could live forever. But this eternal life was useless. A body that could live forever had no consciousness. And when they gained consciousness, they would be bound by the heavenly Tao again and enter the cycle of reincarnation again. Emperor Bai sealed his body in memories. When his body became a corpse he would fuse it with his memories. The extra few hundred years of lifespan was the lifespan of the zombie. It could be said that the thing in front of Li Mu was Emperor Bai but also not Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai's soul and consciousness had already died 3,000 years ago. There was no dispute about this. So it was not Emperor Bai. But the zombie had just been born. It only had consciousness but it had no memories or experience. While it had Emperor Bai's body, it also had his memories. In its heart it was Emperor Bai. It was not wrong to say that it was Emperor Bai. For the time being it was Emperor Bai. If this continued, Li Mu felt that he would go crazy. Emperor Bai's words shocked everyone present. They also did not expect that the demon emperor would be reborn in such a way. Everyone present was here to inherit Emperor Bai's treasures. Now that Emperor Bai was in front of them the atmosphere was a little awkward. He was not dead. This was not an inheritance but a robbery. In this way whether it was the elixirs, dharma treasures or the heavenly tomes they could not get them. A demon sect expert bowed and said, "We did not mean to disturb the demon emperor. Since the demon emperor has been reborn can we leave now?" The others looked at him as if they were looking at an idiot. If they could leave so easily what happened just now would not have happened. At this moment, they all understood that the demon corpses around the demon palace were not an accident. The demon emperor had planned this 3,000 years ago. His goal was to deplete the dharma treasures and dharma powers of those who entered the palace. The elixirs on the first floor, the dharma treasures on the second floor, and the Tao page on the last floor were all for them to kill each other. As they continued to deplete everyone's dharma powers, they provided nourishment for the zombie. If not for the fact that everyone's dharma powers were depleted, the combined attack just now could have killed the zombie. He had spent so much effort to set up this trap. How could he let them leave? Emperor Bai looked at the tiger demon and smiled. "Since you are here it must be fate. Can you borrow something from me before you leave?" The tiger demon looked at Emperor Bai's eyes and felt a little guilty. He asked, "What is it?" Emperor Bai said lightly, "I want to borrow your essence, blood and soul." The tiger demon's face was first filled with fear. Then he realized something. He glared at Emperor Bai and said, "You are already at the end of your rope. What right do you have to say that?" After withstanding the combined attack just now, no matter how strong the zombie was, it was severely injured. Anyone here could have killed it completely. Just now, everyone was stunned by his words. After calming down, it was easy for them to figure out that even if he used to be a demon emperor, he was now just a heavily injured demon corpse. Emperor Bai looked at him and shook his head. "Junior of the tiger tribe, you might have forgotten where this place is. Stop pretending." The tiger demon roared. As if to boost his courage, he controlled the two mountain-splitting axes and chopped at Emperor Bai's head. As long as Emperor Bai was alive, they could not be at ease. Clang! The two mountain-splitting axes clashed, creating a series of sparks. However, Emperor Bai was nowhere to be seen. Behind the tiger demon, a figure appeared out of nowhere. Emperor Bai opened his mouth and bit into the tiger demon's neck with his white fangs. In an instant, the essence, blood and demon soul in his body were sucked dry. Emperor Bai threw the tiger demon's corpse on the ground. After absorbing the tiger demon, Emperor Bai's face became redder. His body became fuller and even a few strands of hair grew out. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and looked at the crowd again. He mumbled, "I am not satisfied with my current body. With all of you it should be enough." Chapter 409. Another bear demon was killed. Even though Emperor Bai looked extremely weak, no one would think that he was truly at the end of his rope. His companion died tragically. Another tiger demon from the demon sect shouted, "Everyone attack together. I don't believe he can take another attack." Everyone was silent. The next moment, countless rays of Dharma spells lit up and engulfed Emperor Bai. At this point no one cared about using up their Dharma powers. If they did not kill the demon corpse in front of them, they would be the ones to die. However, this time, Emperor Bai did not just stand there and take the attacks. His body disappeared. When he reappeared, he was behind another bear demon. His sharp nails pierced into the bear demon's body. In an instant, the bear demon turned into a dried corpse and fell to the ground. Another dozen or so attacks came, and Emperor Bai's figure disappeared mysteriously once again. At the same time, Li Mu felt a chill run down his spine. All the hair on his body stood on end and he smelled a thick corpse aura. The next moment, Emperor Bai appeared behind him. His sharp black nails pierced towards his body. A golden light shot out from Li Mu's body and bounced Emperor Bai far away. Although he was not injured, Li Mu's face darkened. This corpse was obviously severely injured, but it could still teleport. If this continued, no one would be able to attack it. Sooner or later they would become its food. He took out a fulu without hesitation and activated it with his Dharma powers. A golden armored soldier holding a giant sword appeared in the void. When the sixth realm golden armored soldier appeared, the space was still stable and showed no signs of collapsing. Looking at Emperor Bai's figure, Li Mu's guess was confirmed. Due to the protection of the flask space, sixth realm cultivators could not enter without an owner. At this moment, the newly born zombie obtained Emperor Bai's memories and his inheritance. From now on, the cave abode had an owner. However, this was not good news, because the owner of the flask space was no different from a god in his own space. The golden armored soldier waved his giant sword and slashed at Emperor Bai's body. Emperor Bai's body disappeared. The giant sword missed. Seeing this, Huan Ji hesitated for a moment before taking out a black jade talisman and crushing it. A thick black aura gushed out of the jade talisman and formed a demon soul with two horns on its head. Its body also exuded the aura of a sixth-stage cultivator. Under Huan Ji's command, the demon soul flew towards Emperor Bai. At the same time, the giant sword of the golden armored soldier slashed down again. The monster soul released by Huan Ji suddenly disappeared. The next time it appeared, it was already under the golden armored godly soldier's giant sword. With a slash of the sword, the demonic soul was split into two. Although it quickly merged back together, the demonic soul had become much more illusory, and its aura had also withered. Within a short period of time, the last two demons from the monster sect had died at the hands of Emperor Bai. At this moment, Emperor Bai's face was rosy and his hair had grown out. Other than the corpse aura on his body, he looked no different from an ordinary person. His originally weak aura also became stronger once again. At that moment, everyone was in despair. Emperor Bai was undefeatable in this space. After killing these demons, Emperor Bai finally turned his gaze towards the elders of the six sections. His figure disappeared once again. Li Mu used his mind and the Dao Bell flew out. It suddenly enlarged and covered Li Mu, the elders of the six sects, and the few imperial consecrators. Dong. A buzzing sound came from the Dao Bell. Emperor Bai's figure appeared but was blocked outside the Dao Bell. He stretched out his claws and stabbed at the Dao Bell, but his nails were broken. Although they grew back quickly, he could not do anything to the Dao Bell. Immediately after, he started to cast a series of powerful spells. However, he could only make the Dao Bell ring but could not enter the bell. Suddenly, as if he had discovered something, Emperor Bai's figure distorted and turned into a wisp of green smoke. Li Mu's expression changed slightly. The jade bottle that he had snatched from Huan Ji at the second level of the monster palace appeared in his hand. He didn't even think about it before crushing the jade bottle. The remaining crack on the Dao Bell suddenly emitted a golden light. The last crack finally disappeared. Li Mu originally did not want to obtain the jade bottle, but he could feel the Dao Bell's desire for it. According to his guess, the bottle should contain Genesis Qi that could help repair the Dao Bell. With this Genesis Qi, the Dao Bell was finally complete again. At the original crack, the light smoke turned back into Emperor Bai's figure. He looked at the people inside the Dao Bell with some reluctance and flew towards the three people from the Soul Sect. The three soul cultivators wanted to escape, but there was nowhere to run. In a few breaths, their souls were sucked into Emperor Bai's stomach. At this point, the four monster kings had suffered heavy losses. The people from the Demon Path Soul Sect and Monster Path's Demon Path Soul Sect had been completely wiped out. Only the people from the Illusion Sect and Meizong Sect beside Huan Ji were safe, but only temporarily. Li Mu's golden armor soldiers and Huan Ji's demon soul could not get close to Emperor Bai at all. As long as they were within 10 feet of Emperor Bai, he would teleport them far away. They could not even touch the corner of his clothes. Both of them had a time limit. It would not be long before they disappeared. Li Mu could not allow Emperor Bai to continue killing. Even though he was on a different side from Huan Ji and the others, if they all died, it would be his turn to die. While Emperor Bai caught 2 more demons and absorbed their essence blood, Li Mu controlled the Dao Bell to cover the rest of the people. Huan Ji silently lowered her head and fell silent. It was easy to take revenge but difficult to repay kindness. This was the consensus of the Heavenly Fox clan. It was also the experience passed down by the ancestors of the Heavenly Fox clan. Although she did not want to accept Li Mu's kindness, they were all in the same boat now. If they wanted to live, they had to put aside all their grievances and work together to deal with their only enemy. Li Mu looked at Huan Ji and said, "What other trump cards do you have? Take them out. If not, we will all be trapped here." Huan Ji thought for a while and took out a jade talisman. She said, "We cannot send messages in the flask space, but this talisman contains a drop of my essence blood. If we crush this talisman, even if we are outside the flask space, the mother talisman in my brother's hands will sense it. He will know that we are in danger." Li Mu asked, "So what if your brother knows?" Huan Ji said, "My brother is the great elder of Meizong's sect. He is outside now." Li Mu understood what Huan Ji meant. Although they could not tell the people outside what happened, as long as they knew that Huan Ji was in danger, the dozens of level 6 experts outside would work together to open up the space again. By then, even if Emperor Bai had 3 heads and 6 arms, he would not be able to fight against so many experts. Within the Dao Bell, Huan Ji crushed the jade talisman without hesitation. Outside the Demon Emperor's cave in the valley, a handsome man was sitting cross-legged. His expression suddenly changed and he stood up abruptly. The great elder of Meizong's sect asked, "What happened?" The man said, "Huan Ji is in danger." He said without hesitation, "Open up the space." The great elder of Meizong's sect, King Qingguang, and the expert from Meizong's sect flew up at the same time. This fox from Meizong's sect was the son of the Heaven Lord of Illusions. The Heaven Lord of Illusions had an important position in the entire Demon Dao. This operation was led by Meizong's sect. The 4 demon kings also floated in the air. The Taoist sect and the Great Zhou court had joined forces. In order to balance the powers, they had temporarily formed an alliance with the Demon Dao. The 8 of them gathered their dermic powers at one point. A hole gradually tore open in the void. A powerful aura that surpassed level 5 experts emanated from the hole. When they felt the aura, their expressions changed at the same time. How can there be level 6 experts? What a strong corpse aura. Someone from Corpse sect has sneaked in. But why is the space still stable? On the opposite side, the sloppy Taoist priest also stood up and said angrily, "Damn it. You Demon Dao are indeed unscrupulous. You actually secretly let level 6 experts in." The great elder of Meizong's sect said angrily, "Bullsh *T. I think you are the ones who are unscrupulous." Everyone knew that this kind of ownerless space could only allow those below level 6 to enter. Although they also wanted to sneak in secretly, it was impossible. It must be the doing of those people on the opposite side. Just as everyone was confused, the space that they had painstakingly torn open began to rapidly heal and soon disappeared. At this time they finally discovered something unusual. Did something happen inside? Let's attack together. Everyone attacked together, wanting to tear open the space again. However, this time, other than the heaven and earth power becoming extremely chaotic at the place where their dermic powers converged, no other strange phenomena appeared. How is this possible? The Demon Emperor's cave abode is not here. How can an ownerless space move by itself? Could it be that it is not the Demon Emperor's cave abode but a space with a master? The handsome man's face was full of worry. Hyun Jinko's expression changed greatly. Li Mu represented the future of Fulu School. Something happened to him here. How would he explain it to the headmaster and the Grand Supreme Elder? The sloppy Taoist priest slapped his thigh and said bitterly, "It's over. My heavenly secret talisman is finished." Everyone's expression was uncertain. The art of flashing heaven was an upper realm dermic art. The level 7 dermic art could only be used to create storage dermic treasures and open up a small space. To open up a small space outside of the main space required even more strength. What a space with a master meant was self-evident. Could it be that they had accidentally broken into the cave abode of a powerhouse? The sloppy Taoist priest shook his head and said, "Impossible. If that really is a space with a master, we can't open the entrance with just us. They must have encountered other dangers. That strong corpse chi just now, could it be that the ancient corpses in the demon emperor's cave abode had turned into spirits?" Hyun Jinko said, "Let's not care about the reason for now. Let's think of a way to save them first." He remembered that the Dao Bell was with Li Mu. He should be able to protect himself for a short period of time. However, as time passed, it was hard to say. At that moment in the demon emperor's cave abode, everyone stood within the Dao Bell and watched as the crack in the sky gradually closed under Baidi's control. Despair gradually appeared on their faces. This was the White Emperor's cave abode. Here he could use more than 100% of his strength. As for them, they were like turtles in a jar. The Dao sect elders could still maintain their composure. One of the worshippers looked at Li Mu worriedly and asked, "Lord Li, what should we do now?" Li Mu sighed softly and said, "Don't worry. You won't be able to break in for a while. Even a level 7 dermic art could not do anything to the complete Dao Bell. As long as Baidi's strength had not fully recovered, he could not do anything to them. Although the thing outside had received Baidi's inheritance, in essence he was just a slightly more powerful zombie. His strength would not exceed level 6 dermic art. If not for the fact that there was no power of heaven and earth in this space, Li Mu could not use his Dao techniques. He could suppress this zombie alone. After realizing that he could not break through the defense of the bell, Baidi gave up on attacking. He turned and walked into the Demon Emperor Palace. When he walked out again, he had changed his clothes and tied up his hair. At that moment he was no different from the statue. He stood outside the bell and asked indifferently, "Which one of you took my things?" Everyone looked around with a blank expression on their faces. At first their target was the heavenly book. They did not care about anything else at all. Later everyone was running for their lives. How could they care about anything else? Li Mu looked at Huan Ji and asked, "Did you take something from him?" Huan Ji's face darkened as she said coldly, "No." Baidi looked at them indifferently and said, "I am not in a hurry. Everything here will be mine sooner or later." Li Mu said, "Don't say, You are not Baidi. Baidi is already dead. You are just a consciousness born from his corpse." Baidi said, "I am." Li Mu said firmly, "No, you are not." Baidi said in a low voice, "I am Demon Emperor Baidi." Li Mu's interest was piqued. This zombie was far more stubborn than he had imagined. He thought for a while and said, "All right, Demon Emperor. Can you answer a question for me?" Baidi did not agree, but he did not reject either. He looked at Li Mu. Li Mu looked at him and asked slowly, "If there is a ship that can sail on the sea for 3,000 years, as long as one of the planks on the ship is broken, it will be taken down and replaced with a new one. One day when all the planks on the ship have been replaced, will it still be the same ship?" Baidi said indifferently, "Of course not." Li Mu continued to ask, "Then when did it stop being the same?" Baidi opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but he did not say anything. After thinking carefully about this person's question, he was confused. Chapter 4:10. Outside the Dao Bell, the White Emperor fell silent. Li Mu looked at him and urged, "What's wrong with you? Say something." The White Emperor thought for a long time and said, "I am the Demon Emperor." "Oh, you are not." "Oh, I am." Li Mu looked into his eyes and said seriously, "Logically speaking, you are just a corpse. You should have your own person. Living as a corpse, you are unique. You should not be held hostage by the White Emperor's memories. This will make you lose yourself." "Oh, do you know what yourself is?" The White Emperor did not answer. After looking at Li Mu, he turned and left. Talking to this human would make him frustrated and even cause him to doubt himself. He did not like this feeling. He stopped talking to them and sat cross-legged at the entrance of the demon palace, closing his eyes to rest. The White Emperor's demonic corpse avoided talking. Li Mu's plan to reason with him had failed. Li Mu and the rest could only stay in the Dao Bell. After obtaining the White Emperor's memories and becoming the owner of the cave abode, this corpse was undefeatable here. At least to Li Mu and the rest, it was undefeatable. Of course, he could not break through the Dao Bell's defense. However, if this continued, Li Mu and the rest would still be at a disadvantage. The other party was essentially a corpse. Could not eat, drink or sleep for decades. But Li Mu was different from the elders of the six sects Huanji and the demons. Their physical bodies were living bodies. When cultivators reached their level they could completely abstain from eating and drinking. However, the prerequisite was that there was spiritual qi of heaven and earth. Only by drawing spiritual qi of heaven and earth into their bodies could they preserve their physical bodies. But there was nothing here. With the remaining spiritual power in their bodies, they could abstain from eating for months. After a few months, their physical bodies would die, leaving only their primordial spirits. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing would truly be separated by yin and yang. At that time he would truly become one with Su He. Speaking of Su He, he did not know where she was now. If she knew that he had become a ghost, would she be sad or happy? He could also possess another body and be reborn like the Thousand Illusions Venerable Master, but that was not the ending Li Mu wanted. Li Mu scanned the area. There was still a bear and a snake left. If necessary he could use the emergency measure and roast them. As for the snake demon he could forget about it. If he roasted it, how could Li Mu face Brother Bai and his two nieces in the future? As for the bear, its body was riddled with scars and some parts had already turned black. It was obvious that it had been poisoned by corpse poison. There was a high chance that it wouldn't survive. Li Mu couldn't bring himself to eat the poisoned bear's paw. I wonder if fox legs can be roasted. The moment Li Mu looked at Phantom Princess, Xiao Bai's pitiful face appeared in his mind. Only then did he immediately dispel this evil thought. Li Mu glanced at the demon corpse that was sitting at the entrance of the demon imperial palace, unmoving like a mountain. He sat down cross-legged and sighed. This corpse was going to burn them to death. With the protection of the Dao Bell, everyone was temporarily at ease. They sat cross-legged on the ground, healing their wounds and resting. Phantom Princess sat behind Li Mu. Occasionally she would raise her head to look at him. The emotions in her eyes were very complicated. Li Mu had already helped her twice, but there was also an irreconcilable enmity between them. She had been thinking for a long time about how to repay his kindness and take revenge, but she still couldn't figure it out. When she was young, the elders in her clan had told her, "The troubles of a demon's life begin with a human form." At that time she didn't understand the meaning of this sentence. Only now did she have some understanding. How to repay kindness and take revenge at the same time. This was really a troublesome matter. In front of Phantom Princess, Li Mu's eyes were closed, but he didn't stop thinking. In this cave, the chances of winning against this demon corpse were infinitely close to zero. Not to mention him, even if the slovenly Taoist priest came in, he might not be a match for this demon corpse. Fighting with the White Emperor demon corpse here was equivalent to fighting with Xian Jizi on Mount Baiyun or fighting with the Empress in the Immortal's capital. It was even more serious. Two cultivators of similar strength could be evenly matched outside, but in one of them's heavenly flask cave abode, the other wouldn't even have the chance to beg for mercy. Li Mu thought that he had been careful enough to get the Dao page. Who would have thought that there would be such a big surprise waiting for him here? He still had a few trump cards on him, but they weren't much stronger than the golden armor talisman. As for the talisman in this space, every time it wanted to get close to the demon corpse, it would be teleported far away. This repeated dozens of times. Just now it had used up all its spiritual power and completely dissipated. Along with it, the powerful demon soul that Phantom Princess had summoned also dissipated. Li Mu tried to take out a sound transmission talisman to contact Xian Jizi, but there was no response. He took out the spirit conch and sent a message to the Empress, but it was also in vain. He put his hands in his sleeves and silently chanted the 9 syllables mantra, but there was no response. He switched to the Demon Slayer protection art, but it still didn't work. Even the Tao Te Ching, which had always been successful, failed for the first time. There was no spiritual energy in this space, not even the power of heaven and earth. It was a completely dead place. None of the methods that he used to escape with his life would work. Li Mu continued to think. Suddenly there was a low roar in his ears. He opened his eyes and saw the bear demon curled up on the ground in extreme pain. Seeing the bear demon, many people from the Meizong and Mirage sects immediately cried out in fear. He's been poisoned by corpse poison. This corpse poison is very strong. It can't be dispelled with spiritual power. The demon sect was poisoned to death. We have to get rid of him quickly before he turns into a zombie. Otherwise, all of us will be in trouble. All the demon corpses in the Demon Emperor cave abode were ancient corpses that were 3,000 years old. The corpse poison couldn't be compared to ordinary zombies. Even the primordial spirit and demon soul couldn't escape the attack. If he was at the peak of his spiritual power, he might be able to dispel it with great effort. However, after going through several battles, all the humans and demons here were on the verge of overdrawing their spiritual power. Once they were poisoned and couldn't get rid of it, they could only wait for death. The bear demon's face was full of pain and his eyes were filled with despair. Finally, he seemed to have made a decision. He stretched out his hand and slapped the bear demon's head. However, his bare paw didn't fall. Phantom Princess stopped him. With a cold face, she said in a deep voice, "Demon cultivation is so difficult. Are you going to give up just like that?" The bear demon's body was already emitting a thick corpse aura. However, there was still a trace of rationality in his eyes. He gritted his teeth and said with difficulty, I'm hopeless. Kill me. I don't want to become that kind of thing." Phantom Princess didn't say anything. She just channeled the spiritual power in her body into his body. However, the corpse poison was too strong. Her spiritual power couldn't get rid of it. Li Mu watched from afar. Although Phantom Princess wasn't very friendly to humans, she was really good to the demon race. Seeing that her spiritual power was useless, Phantom Princess was silent for a moment. Her palm gradually emitted a golden light. Li Mu was really shocked this time. He was a demon. He actually knew Buddhism. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. It was really good to have a seventh realm father. Phantom Princess had endless treasures. Many of them were precious things that even he didn't have. She could also cultivate both demon and Buddhism. This meant that the Buddhism that countered the demon race was useless against her. She had turned the demon race's weakness into her strength. She was young, but her cultivation wasn't low. She also cultivated both demon and Buddhism. She had treasures one after another. This was a true demon's second generation. Under the Buddha's light, the corpse aura on the bear demon's body was dispelled. However, it was only a little. It couldn't slow down the speed of his transformation. If this continued, he would soon become a complete corpse and lose his consciousness. Li Mu thought for a moment. He stood up and walked over slowly. Seeing him walk over, Phantom Princess's expression changed. She picked up a short sword and pointed it at Li Mu. She said warily, "What do you want?" Li Mu said indifferently, "If you don't move, he really can't be saved." While Phantom Princess was stunned, he had already squatted down and pressed his right hand on the bear demon's body. Li Mu's hand also emitted a golden light. However, the light on his hand was even brighter than the light on Huangji's hand. After the golden light entered the bear demon's body, countless gray gas was forced out of the bear demon's body. Li Mu's other hand shot out a bolt of lightning, completely destroying the gray gas. After doing all this, he clapped his hands and stood up. He walked back to his seat and sat down cross-legged. After the corpse aura was forced out of his body, the bear demon sat up. After feeling it, his face was filled with joy. He kowtowed a few times to Li Mu from afar. Then he sat cross-legged on the spot to heal his injuries. Li Mu looked at the elders and consecrators of the 6 sects and asked, "Are any of you poisoned by the corpse poison?" The elders and consecrators of the Fulu school were not injured. The other sects were also fine. Only a female disciple of the Pill Cauldron sect had her arms scratched by the demon corpse. The corpse aura entered her body and she had been suppressing it with pills. Li Mu placed his hand on her arm and helped her remove the corpse aura. The disciple bowed and said, "Thank you, martial uncle." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "We're family. Don't be so polite." After a while, Phantom Princess walked over and sat down beside Li Mu. She asked, "Why did you save it?" Li Mu retorted, "In your mind, do you think that we humans only know how to kill demons and take their souls?" Phantom Princess said sarcastically, "In the eyes of you humans, aren't we demons also a race that eats humans everywhere? In this world, demons eating humans and humans eating demons were common occurrences. No matter if it was humans or demons, they all had a stereotype of each other. This was unavoidable. Li Mu naturally would not kill all the demons. The little fox in his house was cuter than most humans. The reason why he chose to save this bear demon was because the demon aura on its body was pure and clear. It was not an evil demon. If the demons from the demon sect were poisoned, Li Mu would not have used the Buddha's light to save them. He would have taken the opportunity to send them to meet Buddha. Li Mu's eyes inadvertently swept across Phantom Princess's chest. He found a wound on her left shoulder that was surrounded by a faint gray aura. He glanced at Phantom Princess and asked, "You're poisoned too?" Phantom Princess turned her head and said, "It's none of your business." Li Mu curled his lips and said, "You think I want to care about you?" Phantom Princess coldly snorted, "I won't accept your kindness anymore." Li Mu pointed outside the bell and said, "Then you get out." After a moment of silence, Phantom Princess stopped bickering with Li Mu and asked, "Do you have any other ways to get out?" Li Mu shook his head and asked, "What about you?" Phantom Princess also shook her head and said, "I've used everything I can. I can only hope that Father can find this place and break open the space to save us." Li Mu sighed. Just like Huanji, the only person he could rely on now was the Empress. Although the owner of this cave was the White Emperor's demonic corpse, he could use 200% of his strength here. However, if someone stronger than him was lured into the cave, it would not be like catching a turtle in a jar. It would be like luring a wolf into the house. However, both of their hopes were very slim. This was originally an independent space. After the White Emperor died, this space became ownerless and was fixed in one place. However, it already had an owner now. It was unknown where the demonic corpse had moved it to. Before the White Emperor died, he was a Ninth Realm expert. How could the residence of such an expert be so easily found? Instead of relying on the 10,000 Illusion Lord or the Empress, they might as well rely on themselves. Li Mu thought for a while and a thought flashed across his mind. He suddenly looked at Phantom Princess and asked, "You cultivate both demonic and Buddhist techniques. What level of Buddhist techniques are you at?" Phantom Princess sneered, "What does that have to do with you?" Li Mu said calmly, "If you still want to get out, answer my question honestly. Have a way. Hurry up and tell me. Otherwise, I'll throw you out now and feed you to that corpse." Fifth Realm. Phantom Princess was originally a five-tailed spiritual fox. Even her Buddhist techniques were at the 5th level. She should be about the same age as Lu Hanyan. This meant that her wisdom was better than Xuandu's. Li Mu suddenly had an idea. Although Taoist techniques were more mysterious than Buddhist techniques were obviously stronger than Taoist techniques when it came to restraining demons and ghosts. At the start, although Li Mu also wanted to cultivate both Taoist and Buddhist techniques, he was not like Phantom Princess who had a 7th-level father. The end result was that he could not cultivate either. Helplessly, he could only give up on Buddhist techniques. Up till now, his Buddhist dharmic powers were only at the 1st realm. Using only the 1st level of Dharma power to chant the Heart Sutra was already very effective. If he used the 5th level of Dharma power, wouldn't it be even stronger? Although this was the White Deity cave abode and the demon corpse was at the peak of the flying zombie realm, comparable to the 6th level, it would be countered by the Dharma. If Li Mu could use the Dharma powers of the 5th level, he might be able to defeat her. Li Mu looked at Phantom Princess and asked, "Do you want to work together?" Phantom Princess's eyes flashed and she asked, "How?" Li Mu leaned over and whispered a few words into her ear. Phantom Princess was stunned and then frowned. "You want my primordial spirit to possess your body?" Li Mu was surprised. "You've cultivated your primordial spirit?" Demons did not cultivate their primordial spirits as they had their own cultivation methods. They did not cultivate their souls or condense their souls. Since Phantom Princess managed to condense her demon soul into an primordial spirit, it meant that other than Demon Buddha, she also cultivated Taoist techniques. Phantom Princess did not answer directly and only said, "Is there any other way?" Li Mu nodded, "Yes." Phantom Princess quickly asked, "What other way?" Li Mu said, "Or I can possess your body." Phantom Princess said decisively, "Don't even think about it." Li Mu looked at her and said, "If not for the fact that there is no other way, do you think I would want you to do it?" Being possessed was a big taboo for cultivators. Li Mu knew that Phantom Princess would not agree to him being possessed, so he did not even mention it. As for himself, it was not the first time he was possessed, so he was not that against it. In this kind of matter, he had given his first opportunity to Su He, and then he had given it to her a few more times. After that, he had given it to the Empress, but that was under the circumstances where Li Mu already had great trust in him and the others. Li Mu naturally did not have much trust in Phantom Princess, but there was nothing he could do about it. There were only 3 choices in front of him. Either Phantom Princess possessed his body, or he possessed Phantom Princess. Or the two of them could continue to wait in the bell until the demon corpse changed its mind and let them out. After making this decision, Li Mu struggled intensely in his heart before finally convincing himself. Anyway, it was not the first time. He had been possessed by ghosts and humans before, so it did not matter if there was a fox. Although this kind of thinking was somewhat self-destructive and hopeless, there was really no better way at the moment. Phantom Princess lowered her head and bit her lips, as if she was going through a decision in her heart. Her primordial spirit entering someone else's body was something that she could not accept. What's more, this person was her enemy. But when she thought of Li Mu's primordial spirit entering her body, she instantly felt that this matter was not so difficult to accept. She finally looked at Li Mu, gritted her teeth and said, "Tell me your plan, Li Mu. I need to borrow your Buddhist power." After a while, Phantom Princess asked, "Are you sure?" "Li Mu, let's try it first. If it doesn't work, we can hide in here again. Anyway, you won't lose anything." Phantom Princess pondered for a long time and nodded, "Okay." Li Mu's right hand emitted a golden light and said, "In order to show my sincerity, I will treat your injuries first." Phantom Princess lowered her head and slowly reached out her hand to Li Mu. In the Demon Emperor's cave, Li Mu and Phantom Princess reached an agreement about joining forces. When they began to discuss the details, outside the Demon Emperor's cave, a huge wave had already set off. Previously, when they besieged Li Mu, they had lost a lot of Demon Dao experts. Even Soul Sect's first elder, Nether Saint, had fallen. This time, in order to obtain the Heavenly Book and the Demon Emperor's inheritance, Soul Sect, Demon Sect, Mirage Sect, and Meizong Sect had sent out dozens of experts, but none of them had returned. Including the daughter of Illusion Lord, they were all trapped in the Demon Emperor's cave. After receiving the news, Illusion Lord had already ended his seclusion in advance and left Meizong Sect. No one knew where he went. At the same time, all the Demon Dao experts had received an order to immediately report to the subsect if there was any news about the Demon Emperor's cave. North County Baiyun Mountain. The Fulu School's Master's Disciple Acceptance Ceremony would be held soon. These days, many elders of other sects had already come to Baiyun Mountain to congratulate. But at this time the Fulu School's Master Xianxia had not shown up. After asking, they found out that he was no longer in the mountain. Shen Du. In Baichuan Academy, two middle-aged men who were playing chess suddenly raised their heads at the same time and looked at the sky in shock. What happened? His Majesty actually left Shen Du? The Emperor left the palace. What nonsense. In Changel Palace, Mr. Mei sighed and put away the worry on his face. He said, "Send an order to all the officials. His Majesty is in seclusion to cultivate. He doesn't need to attend tomorrow's morning court. When he needs to attend the court, let us know." Chapter 411. Demon Emperor Cave. Li Mu sat cross-legged inside the Dao Bell, shaking his head and sighing. It took 3,000 years to give birth to its own consciousness, but it has to live for someone else. It can't be its true self. How sad, how regretful. As a person, a corpse, it doesn't even have its own thoughts. What's the use of giving birth to its own consciousness? If it was me, I'd rather die. Some corpses might as well lie down for another 3,000 years and live as someone else for a few hundred years. What's the point? It's so comfortable lying down. Li Mu seemed to be talking to himself, but his voice penetrated the Dao Bell and resounded throughout the entire Demon Emperor cave. At the entrance of the Demon Emperor Palace, the White Emperor corpse sat cross-legged. Although its eyes were closed, the corners of its eyes were twitching, and its aura was fluctuating. Li Mu sensed this change and struck while the iron was hot. He looked at Illusion Princess and asked, "Fox, what's the difference between this and possession?" Illusion Princess glared at him and gritted her teeth. "Don't call me Fox. Li Mu, be careful next time." Illusion Princess took a deep breath and looked at the White Emperor corpse. She replied to Li Mu, "Of course there's a difference. A person who is being possessed knows how to resist and willingly let himself be possessed. I've never seen such a stupid person. He's not a person to begin with. He's a corpse. Even a corpse wouldn't be so stupid." Inside the Law Bell, everyone watched as Li Mu and Huanji sang the same tune and sighed inwardly. They were trapped in the Dao Bell by the White Emperor corpse, so they could only talk and comfort themselves. At the entrance of the Demon Emperor Palace, the Demon Emperor corpse listened to the conversation between Li Mu and Illusion Princess. He felt his heart becoming more and more chaotic. He couldn't take it anymore and sealed his hearing. Although he couldn't hear the voices of the couple, there were still two voices arguing in his heart. One voice said, "You are White Emperor. Your body is his body. Your memories are his memories. You are Demon Emperor, White Emperor." The other voice retorted, "White Emperor is already dead. He died 3,000 years ago. You are not him. He forced these new memories onto you. You are the White Emperor. You are not the White Emperor." There seemed to be two consciousnesses in his sea of consciousness. The two consciousnesses kept arguing about who he was, and neither could convince the other. The demonic corpse finally couldn't hold it in any longer and said angrily, "Shut up." Inside the law bell, Li Mu raised his chin and asked Huanji, "Who is he talking to?" Phantom Princess shook her head. "I don't know." Then she looked at Li Mu and asked, "Is it time?" Li Mu looked at the demonic corpse that was beginning to mumble and said in a low voice, "Wait a little longer." Huanji thought about it and a jade thumb ring appeared in her hand. She handed it over to Li Mu. Li Mu asked, "What is this?" Huanji said, "It can store spiritual energy and spiritual energy, allowing everyone here to send their spiritual energy in. If we wear it, we can use the spiritual energy within at any time. Our chances will be higher." Li Mu did not take it immediately and asked suspiciously, "Is this another scheme of yours?" Huanji snorted coldly. "Take it or leave it." The moment before she put it away, Li Mu snatched it from her and said, "You'd better wear it. It's safer to wear it." As a fox, although Huanji was cunning and scheming, she was not stupid. At this time, if she still set a trap for Li Mu, the word stupid would not be enough to describe her. Li Mu passed the thumb ring to one of the consecrators and asked them to take turns to transfer their mana into the ring. No one had any objections to this. They also knew that whether or not everyone here could escape and survive depended on Li Mu. While waiting, Li Mu continued to ask Huanji, "What other good things do you have? Take them all out. If you don't take them out now, you might not have a chance in the future." Huanji thought about it and took out a jade bottle. Li Mu asked, "What is this?" Huanji said, "Some heaven and earth power is sealed in the bottle. Can be used at a crucial moment." Li Mu took the bottle from behind and said unhappily, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" 10,000 Illusion Godlord was more thoughtful than him. Li Mu did not expect that Monster Emperor's cave would not have heaven and earth power. If he knew, he would have asked the Empress to seal a few bottles for him. Then he wouldn't be in such a bad state. Huanji snorted coldly and said, "Why should I tell you this? Am I close to you?" Li Mu continued to ask, "What else is there?" Huanji obviously had a bottle of heaven and earth space. She didn't want to talk to Li Mu and poured out a bunch of things. Li Mu's eyes lit up. He knew that his chance had come. This was actually another rich woman. He loved such rich women the most. Li Mu looked at these treasures and kept talking. "There are so many spirit jades. Why didn't you take them out just now? This string of Buddha beads is a good treasure. It might be useful later. This pill has a strong medicinal fragrance. It will definitely be good for recovering magic power. I'll take it first." Huanji was indeed a second-generation demon. The pile of treasures dazzled Li Mu. Li Mu finally looked at a white furry thing and asked, "What is this?" Huanji picked up the item and shook her wrist. The originally soft tail immediately became hard and straight like a sharp sword. The flow of spiritual power on it was not inferior to Li Mu's Xianxia sword. This was obviously a top-grade magic treasure. At this time, Huanji said indifferently, "The black foxtail is a treasure of my clan. It is useless to you." Li Mu took the black foxtail from her hand and said, "Take it first. If my weapon is damaged, I have a replacement." Now that they had a common enemy, Huanji did not think too much. She only said, "I've already taken out everything. What about you?" Li Mu looked at her and said, "Young mistress, do you think that everyone is like you and has a seventh realm father? I've already used up my things when I destroyed those demon corpses. Otherwise, why would I ask you for them? I'm not that kind of shameless person." The ring that stored magic power circled around in everyone's hands and returned to Li Mu's hand. Everyone present, whether it was the elders of the six sects or the disciples of the demon sects, were all willing to transfer most of their remaining magic power into it. Li Mu was still waiting for an opportunity to continue singing the same tune as Huanji. "What a pity, what a pity. What's the point of living like this? Might as well continue to be an emotionless corpse." Next, Li Mu saw some strange changes in the White Emperor Demon Corpse's body. He no longer responded to Li Mu and Huan Ji. He sat cross-legged at the entrance of the Demon Emperor Palace and began to talk to himself frequently. It was as if he was suffering from schizophrenia. The corpse aura on his body was sometimes stable and sometimes chaotic, sometimes high and sometimes low. At a certain moment when the corpse's aura weakened again, Li Mu looked at Huan Ji and said, "It's time." Huan Ji bit her lower lip lightly. After taking a deep breath, her gaze became firm. A shadow floated out of her body and entered Li Mu's body. Li Mu stood up silently and walked out of the Dao Bell. Inside the Dao Bell, everyone's gazes were on him. The White Emperor Demon Corpse was still meditating at the entrance of the Demon Emperor Palace. Under the control of the sword technique, the Xianxia sword shone with a bright green light and pierced towards the Demon Corpse's head. The Demon Corpse's eyes suddenly opened. A blood-red light flashed in his eyes. He stretched out his hands and used his palms to hold the sword. The Xianxia sword could not move an inch further. A moment later his figure disappeared from the spot. At the same time, behind Li Mu, a black shadow appeared out of thin air. His 10 fingers were like lightning. His black nails pierced through the air and pierced towards Li Mu's neck. At this moment, a blinding golden light exploded from Li Mu's body. Like cold water being poured on a hot rock, the Demon Corpse's body, which was harder than magic treasures, was immediately burned by the golden light. The Demon Corpse let out an angry roar and wanted to teleport away. However, he realized that the space here was also affected by the golden light. He could not teleport at all. His body quickly retreated, trying to escape from the golden light. Seeing that Huan Ji's Heart Sutra was effective, how could Li Mu allow him to do as he wished? The Demon Corpse retreated frantically. Li Mu followed him like a shadow, exposing him to the golden light. The Demon Corpse was very close to Li Mu. On his body it was rapidly burning and festering. He stretched out his hands. The nails on his hands flew out and pierced towards Li Mu. Li Mu used the Xianxia block. His body slowed down. In this short period of time the Demon Corpse was already far away. Although the Buddha's light was powerful, it also weakened quickly. When it was a few hundred feet away from Li Mu, the golden light could no longer affect the Demon Corpse. However, it was impossible for it to attack Li Mu from the front. The Demon Corpse hid in the shadow of the statue in front of the palace. In a place where the golden light could not reach, it roared. Suddenly, something flew out from the Demon Royal Palace. Li Mu immediately noticed that it seemed to be a set of armor. After the set of armor flew out, it automatically disassembled into a head armor, chest armor, arm armor, leg armor, and so on. It automatically attached itself to the body of the Demon Corpse and started to wriggle. The gaps of the armor immediately fused together. In this way, the body of the White Emperor Demon Corpse was completely covered by the armor. Not only that, but there was also a giant sword weapon in his hand. Even so, he did not charge towards Li Mu. Instead, he held the giant sword in his hand and slashed forward. As he slashed down with his sword, a huge shadow appeared behind him. This shadow was a few hundred feet tall and was also wearing armor. It held a giant sword that was 100 feet tall and slashed towards Li Mu. In the next moment, Li Mu felt that he was locked on by a powerful aura. It seemed that no matter how he dodged, the sword would land on his head. This was obviously a superpower that the Demon Corpse had used based on the memories of the White Emperor. He could hide in the Law Bell and avoid the sword. However, he had left the Law Bell to defeat the Demon Corpse. For this, he had already drained the people in the Law Bell and Phantom Princess dry. If he returned now, everyone could only sit quietly in the Law Bell and wait for death. He crushed the jade bottle that stored the power of heaven and earth with one hand and formed a seal with the other. His lips trembled and 2 black and white fish appeared above his head, forming a giant Taiji diagram. The moment the Taiji diagram formed, the giant sword fell. The tip of the sword fell on the Taiji diagram and was immediately swallowed. Then the body of the sword and the hilt. The giant sword was swallowed by the Taiji diagram and the armored shadow disappeared. The power of heaven and earth was limited. Li Mu did not waste any time. He changed his seal again and the Xianxia sword split into 2 then 4. In an instant, there were tens of thousands of sword shadows that shot towards the White Emperor Demon Corpse. Streaks of sword shadows slammed into the armor, and the White Emperor Demonic Corpse kept retreating. Cracks gradually appeared on the armor, and after withstanding countless streaks of sword light, It collapsed. Countless streaks of sword light slashed his body. Fine wounds appeared on the demon corpse's body. Some were so deep that bones could be seen but no blood flowed out. Wisps of gray gas surged out from his wounds and covered his entire body. Under the nourishment of the gray gas, the wounds slowly healed. The last move of the Demon Slayer protection incantation was extremely powerful. With Li Mu's current cultivation level, even if it could not directly kill a 6th realm primordial spirit, it could still cause fatal damage. Unfortunately, the White Emperor demon corpse was a corpse that had turned into a demon. Its consciousness was hidden in its physical body and it did not have a primordial spirit. Li Mu formed another seal and said, "Heaven and earth are boundless. Wind and thunder receive orders. Dragons fight in the wild. All 10 sides will be destroyed. Heavenly Lord Tai as the law commands." Thunderclouds gathered above the White Emperor demonic corpse's head, and a green gust of wind blew around his body. As the gust of wind blew, the wounds on his body that had just healed split open again. At the same time, countless bolts of lightning struck down from the thunderclouds above his head. Finally, the thunderclouds descended directly and completely enveloped the demon corpse. Within the thunderclouds, purple lightning swam continuously. The rumbling sounds made one's scalp tingle. The power of heaven and earth stored in the jade bottle was only enough for Li Mu to use these 3 moves. If he was forced into a corner, Li Mu would have no choice but to use the remaining power of heaven and earth, even at the risk of being severely injured again. Everyone's gaze was fixed on the thunderclouds. That was their last hope. After some time, the thunderclouds finally dispersed. The demon corpse stood on the spot as if he had been dismembered. His body was covered in wounds and charred marks from being struck by lightning. The corpse aura on his body was almost non-existent. However, the wounds on his body were still wriggling and healing. His aura was also rising bit by bit. The demon corpse let out a long howl and took a deep breath. After the howl, countless corpse aura gushed out from the tombstones around the demon palace and surged into his body. In just an instant, all the wounds on his body were completely healed. His aura also reached its peak again. Within the law bell, everyone's faces were filled with despair. Was a 9th realm powerhouse really so powerful that they could not even defeat his corpse after he died? The demon corpse, who had recovered to its peak, stared at Li Mu with blood-red eyes and said eerily, "I can feel it. The page of my heavenly book is on you. Greedy human, I will be the first to kill you." He stared at Li Mu. Just as he was about to take a step forward, his body suddenly froze. At this moment he suddenly felt a chill run down his spine, as if the end of the world was coming. This was a premonition. For a powerhouse of his level, premonition represented foresight to a large extent. The source of this feeling came from that human. It was obvious that if he continued to attack that human, something terrible would happen. The demon corpse calculated with his fingers, and the premonition in his heart became even stronger. This feeling of impending doom made him involuntarily take a step back. At this moment, a voice in his body shouted, "Are you afraid? Hurry up and kill him and devour his soul and flesh. This is the price he has to pay for stealing the heavenly book and violating the demon emperor's authority." At this moment, another voice said, "You are you. You are not the White Emperor and you are not anyone else. Follow your heart and don't become someone else's puppet. Kill him. Be yourself. Kill him. Be yourself." 2 voices echoed in his mind at the same time. The White Emperor demon corpse held his head and shouted, "Shut up, both of you, shut up." Seeing the White Emperor demon corpse holding his head and muttering to himself again, his aura fluctuating, Li Mu quietly withdrew his hand gesture. This was the trump card he had prepared. Now it seemed that he might not be able to use it. Li Mu looked calmly at the struggling demon corpse. It was obvious that there were at least 2 consciousnesses fighting for control of the body. Under normal circumstances, this was a normal sign of encountering inner demons. Some inner demons would produce a second or even more consciousnesses in the mind. This was called a split personality. The personality of the body depended on which consciousnesses controlled the body. If one was controlled by the evil consciousnesses, most cultivators would become killing machines. If they were controlled by other inner demons, their personality would change drastically. For this demon corpse, if the consciousnesses that insisted that he was the White Emperor won, then he would be the White Emperor from then on. If the other consciousnesses won, then he would be an ordinary demon corpse. Although he would not have the White Emperor's memories and abilities, he would have his own corpse rebirth. Everything in this world would be new to him. Li Mu looked at the pained demon corpse and shouted, "You just came to this world. Don't you want to use your own eyes to explore everything in this world? The White Emperor is only an antique from 3,000 years ago. This world is no longer the world he knows. Be yourself or be someone else. Which will you choose?" With the support of spiritual power, his voice echoed in the cave abode. The demon corpse hugged his head and growled, "I am the White Emperor. I am not the White Emperor. I am the White Emperor. No, I am not the White Emperor. The boat is no longer the boat. I am not the White Emperor. Damn it, get out of my body. Get out of my body." He roared at the sky. The corpse aura on his body suddenly exploded. A ball of light was forced out of his body. After the ball of light left his body, the demon corpse suddenly quieted down. Confusion appeared in his eyes. He muttered, Who am I?" Soon the confusion faded. He no longer had the memories of the White Emperor. Looking at Li Mu, his mind was filled with the thousands of sword shadows and the torturous wind and thunder. At this moment, the golden light emitted by this human made him feel uneasy and disgusted. The demon corpse looked up at the sky. Suddenly he flew up and tore open space, revealing another azure sky. He jumped out of the space crack. The crack quickly closed. The demon emperor's cave abode was silent. It was easy to leave the heavenly flask cave abode. However, it was impossible for him to enter by himself. He ran away. The demon corpse left? We are safe. Inside the Dao Bell, everyone was cheering. Li Mu kept the ball of light without leaving a trace. Then he put away the Dao Bell and forced Huanji's primordial spirit out of her body. Huanji's primordial spirit returned to her body. She stared at Li Mu and gritted her teeth. He took the heavenly book. Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't listen to that guy's nonsense. I was the first to leave. How could I have taken it?" Huanji gritted her teeth and looked at him. She said in a low voice, "Return my treasures to me." Li Mu looked at her and asked curiously, "Treasures? What treasures?" Huanji was stunned. She looked at the thumb ring on Li Mu's hand. A white light flashed and the thumb ring on Li Mu's hand disappeared. Huanji raised her head and looked at Li Mu. She said seriously, "Although I am not human, you are not human either." Li Mu's face didn't turn red and his heart didn't skip a beat. He had never forgotten that Phantom Princess was his enemy. There was no need to be polite with his enemy. Moreover, if it was not for him, Huanji would have died at least twice. She even possessed his body and took advantage of him. It was only right for him to take some benefits from her. Looking at Huanji's disdainful eyes, Li Mu said, "I saved you twice. Is this how the heavenly fox race treats its benefactor?" Huanji seemed to have thought it through. She said, "I don't want those things anymore. Just take it as the reward for saving me. From now on, I don't owe you anything." Li Mu looked at her and shook his head. "As the daughter of a heavenly lord, is your life only worth those things? Doesn't your conscience hurt when you say that we don't owe each other anything?" Huanji said angrily, Li Mu said, "What about you? If you want to think like that, I can't do anything about it. Anyway, I'm not asking you to repay me. What about the heavenly fox race repaying kindness?" "That's all." Huanji's face turned red. Her chest heaved up and down. After a while she stretched out her hands. 2 short swords appeared in her hands. She gritted her teeth and said, "I'll kill you first and then kill myself. Once we die, our enmity will be erased." Li Mu walked to the front of everyone and said, "The Demon Emperor's cave has no owner now. Everyone cast your spells and leave this place." Demon Nation on a mountain peak. There was a fluctuation in space. Dozens of figures appeared out of thin air. Breathing in the fresh air and feeling the vitality of the surrounding plants and animals, everyone had a look of relief on their faces. They had never felt that a world with plants and animals was so beautiful. That dead space had left an indelible shadow on them. The demon corpse had disappeared. No one knew where it went. In the distant sky, a stream of light suddenly streaked across. A middle-aged man appeared in front of everyone. This man did not have any spiritual power fluctuations. He looked like a mortal. But a mortal could not cross such a long distance in an instant. The only explanation was that his cultivation was much higher than everyone present. When Huanji saw the middle-aged man, she flew into his arms and cried. Li Mu's expression changed. He was very familiar with the aura of this man. Cui Ming had this aura when he was possessed by the 10,000 Illusion Heaven Lord's clone. Without a doubt, the man in front of him was Huanji's father, the master of the Demon Path's Mirage sect and Meizong sect. He was the former Grand Elder of the Mirage sect, the 10,000 Illusion Heaven Lord. If he knew that this person was nearby, he would have treated Huanji better. Unfortunately, it was all too late. The middle-aged man looked at Huanji with heartache and asked, "My dear daughter, what's wrong? Who bullied you?" Huanji wiped her tears and pointed at Li Mu. At this moment, Li Mu felt that he was locked on by an extremely powerful aura. A chill rushed from his tailbone to the back of his head. His body and mind seemed to be frozen at this moment. Not only was his body unable to move, but even his mind stopped working. This was the first time Li Mu truly experienced the power of the seventh realm. Although he was with the Empress every day, he had never seen the Empress display her full strength. This was the most dangerous moment Li Mu had ever encountered. At this moment, his life was completely controlled by someone else. However, this feeling of being at the mercy of others only lasted for a moment. In the next moment, Li Mu regained control of his body and mind. A figure appeared in front of him. Looking at the figure in front of him and smelling the familiar fragrance, Li Mu was so touched that he wanted to cry. He blurted out, "Your Majesty." Zhou Yi looked at him gently and said softly, "I'm here. Don't be afraid." Chapter 412. The middle-aged man looked at Zhou Yi with surprise. The Empress of the Great Zhou. Zhou Yi looked at him indifferently and said coldly, "Old fox." The two looked at each other and didn't do anything else. The clouds above everyone's head suddenly dispersed. There was no killing intent on the mountain peak, but every step was filled with killing intent. The 10,000 Illusion Lord looked at the Empress with a hint of fear in his eyes. "You actually came personally?" The 10,000 Illusion Lord looked at Huanji and said, "I only have one daughter. For my precious daughter, I naturally have to come." Zhou Yi said, "He's my subject. For my subject, why can't I come?" As soon as she finished speaking, a stream of light flashed across the horizon. Another figure instantly arrived. Xianxia looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, are you all right?" Li Mu smiled and said, "I'm fine." Xianxia. 10,000 Illusion Lord. Xianxia and the 10,000 Illusion Lord looked at each other. The latter's gaze swept across Xianxia and the Empress. He waved his sleeve and swept up Huanji and the others, saying, "Let's go." Seeing them turn into streams of light and leave, the Empress and Xianxia didn't stop them. Between transcending realm experts, unless there was a huge difference in strength, they wouldn't easily start a fight. Even if it was 1 against 2, it would be difficult to determine the victor. For the others present, it was a disaster. In the sky, the 10,000 Illusion Lord asked Huanji, "What happened?" Huanji lowered her head and said, "The demonic emperor's inheritance was a scam. It was a trap set up by Emperor 3,000 years ago. His goal was to lure living people in and use their essence blood to revive his demonic corpse. All of us almost died in the hands of that demonic corpse." The 10,000 Illusion Lord asked again, "Did you get the heavenly book?" Huanji shook her head and said, "It should have fallen into Li Mu's hands." The Lord of Illusions said regretfully, "What a pity. If not for the Empress of the Great Zhou and the headmaster of the Fulu school Xianxia who obtained that page of the heavenly book, we would have been able to lead the demon race and restore the glory of the demon race." Huanji asked, "Why didn't father snatch the heavenly book back?" The Lord of Illusions shook his head and said, "Not to mention Xianxia, even if the Empress of the Great Zhou was alone, I would not snatch the heavenly tomes from her." Huanji thought of the beautiful woman who descended from the sky and muttered, "She is the Empress of the Great Zhou?" The Lord of Illusions said, "Such a young 7th-level cultivator. She is the only one in the entire mainland. This woman is very strong. I'm afraid that only the elders of the Sage sect have the strength to fight her." Huanji said in disbelief, "But she's so young." The Heavenly Lord of Illusions said leisurely, "How can the Emperor Qi born from the psyche of tens of thousands of people be ordinary? In the 10 continents and 3 islands, there are not many people who are stronger than her." Huanji looked back, clenched her fists and gritted her teeth. The Heavenly Lord of Illusions patted her head and said, "Don't be disappointed. Sooner or later you will reach her cultivation level." When you go back this time, go into seclusion and comprehend the heavenly tomes. Huanji nodded and gritted her teeth. She said, when I break through I will deal with you. The heavenly Lord of Illusions thought of something and his eyes flashed. He said, the headmaster of the Fulu school and the empress of the Great Zhou came here personally for him. This Li Mu must have a big secret. He also has the heavenly tomes of the demon clan. He will always be a threat. If there is a chance in the future we must get rid of him. Huanji raised her head and looked at the heavenly Lord of Illusions with a complicated expression. She said, Father, he saved my life. The heavenly Lord of Illusions frowned and said, then it's not easy to kill him. It's best if we can use him. If not, it won't be too late to kill him after you have repaid your debt. On the mountain peak, the bear demon clasped his hands at Li Mu and said, if there is a chance in the future, Lord Li, please come to my bear clan. I will definitely treat you with great hospitality. The snake demon also clasped his hands at Li Mu and said, thank you, Lord Li, for saving my life. You will always be a friend of my clan. Li Mu waved his hand at them and did not make things difficult for them. A large part of the friction between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Fei nation was instigated by the demon Dao. The Fei nation was not a single entity and there were countless Fei kings. Not all of them were enemies with the Great Zhou dynasty. I will take my leave first. The two demons bowed at him at the same time. Their bodies turned into streams of light and disappeared into the forest. This time the 4 demon kings had sent out the elites of their clans. In the end, only 1 bear and 1 snake remained out of the 25th realm demons. The wolf clan and the leopard clan were completely wiped out. The status of these demon clans in the demon nation would probably change. Other than that, the demon path, the soul sect and the demon sect did not get any benefits. None of the experts who entered the cave abode came out alive. After today they would probably be reduced to the demon path. In addition to the demon path experts who died at the hands of Li Mu, the demon path would probably have to behave for a long time. On the other hand, although the disciples of the 6 sects and the consecrators of the imperial court were more or less injured, at least none of them were missing. Li Mu was the biggest winner of this trip. As Xianxia breathed a sigh of relief, he said, Junior brother, why don't you leave the Great Zhou court and come to Mount Baiyun to cultivate? The imperial court's mission is too dangerous. If anything happens to you, how am I going to explain it to Marshal Uncle Fu Daozi? When he heard the news about Li Mu from Hyunjinko, his heart was in his mouth. If something happened to Li Mu, it would definitely be a huge loss that the Fulu school would not be able to bear. After such a thing happened, he could not be at ease letting Li Mu stay in the Great Zhou court. As Xianxi's voice fell, Zhou Yi looked at him indifferently. He did not say anything and looked at the scenery in the distance. However, his fists in his sleeves were tightly clenched. Li Mu shook his head and said, cultivation is full of danger, but it is also full of opportunities. If you train yourself more, it will be beneficial for your future cultivation. Cultivating in seclusion at Mount Baiyun is safe, but it will not be beneficial for your future cultivation. Xianxia sighed and said, Junior brother's words make sense. Let's do as you say. Zhou Yi continued to admire the scenery, and his fists in his sleeves were slowly loosened. Li Mu stretched out his hand. With a thought, the Dao bell floated in his palm. He looked at Xianxia and said, there is a strand of Genesis Qi in the White Emperor cave dwelling. The cracks on the Dao bell have already been repaired. Senior brother, bring it back to the mountain. Just as he finished speaking, the Dao bell buzzed and flew behind Li Mu to hide. Xianxia said helplessly, since the Dao bell is willing to follow junior brother, let it follow you. With the Dao bell by junior brother's side, I will feel more at ease. In truth, Li Mu was just being polite. Who wouldn't want such a powerful treasure? If it wasn't for the Dao bell in the Demon Emperor cave dwelling, they would not have been able to see him. It was also because of the Dao bell that he could be so fearless from beginning to end. Xianxia looked at Zhou Yi and said, Junior brother Ling Jizi, please take care of him, your majesty. Zhou Yi said indifferently, I will take care of my people. I don't need you to remind me. Xianxia did not say anything else. He said to the disciples of the other 5 sects, follow me back to Baiyun Mountain. Your elders are also there. The elders of the 5 sects bowed and said yes. Xianxia led everyone away. Only Li Mu, the empress, and the high priests were left. Li Mu stretched out his hand and absorbed a ball of light into his body. He closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, a strange light flashed across his eyes. 3 streaks of light flew over from afar. It was the sloppy Taoist priest and the other 2 high priests. The 2 high priests bowed to the empress and said, "Greetings, your majesty." The sloppy Taoist priest only cupped his hands slightly. When he saw Li Mu, he breathed a sigh of relief. Zhou Yi said calmly, "Let's go back to Fairy's capital." She grabbed Li Mu's shoulder and the 2 of them disappeared instantly. On the spot, one of the high priests sighed and said, "Master Li is indeed a favored official." To save him, the empress actually came personally. The sloppy Taoist priest put his hands behind his head and said indifferently, "I really do favor him. As for whether he's a subordinate or not, I don't know." North County. Xianxia County. In the courtyard of the Li family's old residence. Li Mu touched the back of his head and looked at the figure standing in the courtyard in confusion. He asked, "Your Majesty, aren't we going back to Fairy's capital?" He thought the Empress would bring him back to Fairy's capital directly. However, the Empress asked him to bring her to Xianxia County. She even insisted on visiting his ancestral residence. Zhou Yi said indifferently, "What's the rush? It's not easy to come out. We'll go back in a few days." Li Mu continued to ask, "Your Majesty, you're not going to court?" Zhou Yi looked at him and asked, "Do you feel uncomfortable being alone with me?" Li Mu smiled apologetically and said, "Not at all. I couldn't ask for more." As the Empress, she had not even left Fairy's capital. It was not bad to take this opportunity to let her see her empire with her own eyes. She was the one who took the initiative. It was not Li Mu who seduced her and made her ignore the imperial court. Although they both made the emperor not attend court, he did not have the warmth of a hibiscus tent, nor did he have the pleasure of attending banquets. He was fundamentally different from Yang Guifei. Zhou Yi looked around and asked, "You grew up here?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Zhou Yi continued to look around, but Li Mu's thoughts were elsewhere. Although the mission this time was extremely dangerous and he almost died in the Demon Emperor's cave, it was a daunting experience without danger. He had taken such a huge risk, but his rewards were also huge. The White Emperor's memories were forced out of the demonic corpse's body and landed in Li Mu's hands. The demonic corpse had just been born and the space of consciousness was still blank. It suddenly received these memories, so of course it would be greatly affected. It would even think that it was the White Emperor. However, Li Mu had his own mature and complete consciousness. An unfamiliar memory would not have any effect on him. It was not the first time he digested other people's memories. With venerable thousand illusions in front, Li Mu did not take long to digest the White Emperor's memories. And the moment he obtained the White Emperor's memories, he found a way to control the White Emperor's cave and became the new master of the cave. With a thought, Li Mu's body appeared in the cave again. This place was still desolate and there was white fog everywhere. Li Mu blew and the white fog gradually dissipated. The true appearance of the White Emperor's cave appeared before his eyes for the first time. The sky here was gray. There was not a trace of cloud and there was nothing at all. The ground was brown. There were dilapidated walls, countless tombstones and demonic corpses everywhere. The Demon Emperor's palace stood alone in the center of the space. Looked like a huge tomb. The entire space was filled with dead silence. There was not even a trace of life. The Empress floated beside him and said, "This is the White Emperor's cave." Li Mu was shocked. He said in shock, "Your Majesty, how did you come in?" Zhou Yi glanced at him and said, "I came in when I wanted to." Breaking open the space from the outside and forcefully entering an occupied cave was not something she could do with her 7th realm cultivation. She must have followed Li Mu in when he opened the cave. This also sounded the alarm for Li Mu. Even if he had the cave of a 9th realm expert, it did not mean that a 7th realm expert could not do anything to him. Although he was the owner of this cave, his strength was too low. In this cave he was still not a match for a transcendent realm expert. Zhou Yi looked at him and said, "In front of a 7th realm expert and above, do not rashly enter the cave." Li Mu nodded seriously and said, "I understand." Then he looked at this dead silent space and asked, "Your Majesty, why is there not a trace of life here? Is this normal?" Zhou Yi said, "It is not normal." Li Mu asked again, "Then what should a normal flask heaven space be like?" Zhou Yi looked at him and put her hand on his shoulder. Li Mu's vision blurred and he appeared in another space. The space was not big. It was about the size of 2 Li residences, but it was full of vitality. The sky was blue. Although there was no sun, it was as if he was under the bright sun. A few clouds dotted the sky. They were all in the shape of animals. There were butterflies, rabbits, deer. Li Mu stood on a grassland. The grass under his feet was green and shady. Sometimes there were a few small flowers. There was a stone path beside his feet. Behind the path was a simple straw hut. There were 2 gardens in front and on both sides of the hut. In the gardens, there were hundreds of flowers competing with each other. There was a faint floral fragrance in the air. In front of the path there was a small lake. The lake water was clear. A few fish swam in the water. They shook their tails and swam happily into the depths. This was the small world in the Empress's heart. Li Mu looked up at the cute 7-colored clouds in the sky. The Empress was not young, but she still had the heart of a young girl. Of course, this was not the most important point. What was important was that although this space was small, it was full of vitality. Although the Demon Emperor's cave was big, it was full of dead silence. Li Mu took a breath of the sweet air and said, "To be honest, after I retired, I wanted to live in a place like this. Of course, it would be better if the place was bigger. I have many people in my family. One small hut would not be enough." The next moment he appeared in the dead space of the Demon Emperor's cave. Li Mu looked around and asked, "Your Majesty, why did this place become like this?" The Empress looked at him and said, "When all the flaming pot caves were first opened, they were all dead places like this. It was the owner of the cave that gave the cave life. The White Emperor has been dead for 3,000 years. The cave cannot replenish spiritual energy from the outside. The spiritual energy in the cave will slowly dissipate. It is not strange that it has become like this. As long as you manage it well, it will recover its vitality sooner or later." Hearing the Empress say this, Li Mu was relieved. It was not easy to find a cave for free. If it was always dead and could not be lived in, then what was the use of it? After all, this would be Li Mu's home in the future. With his home in such a mess, he could not bear it for even a minute. He did as he said. First, he gathered the broken demon corpses together and burned them. Then he turned all the tombstones back into stone and leveled the ground. Last night, Li Mu discovered that there were 10 more tombstones near the square of the Demon Emperor's palace. He waved his hand and the last 10 tombstones rose from the ground. Then Li Mu discovered that under each tombstone there was a demon corpse. He did not expect that there were 10 fish that escaped the net in the Demon Emperor's palace. He gathered the 10 corpses together and set them on fire again. However, these 10 demon corpses did not change at all in the true Samadhi fire. Li Mu was about to increase the firepower when Zhou Xian suddenly stretched out her hand and said, "Wait." She looked at the demon corpses that were bathing in the fire and said, "These corpses are not normal. When they were alive, they should have been 7th realm or even 8th realm elites." Then she shook her head and said, "Unfortunately, I do not know how to refine corpses. The corpses of such elites should be able to be refined into 6th realm corpses." Li Mu was stunned for a moment, then immediately extinguished the fire. He looked at the Empress and rubbed his hands, saying embarrassedly, "Refining corpses, I just happen to know a little." Chapter 413. Li Mu knew a lot about refining corpses. It was no exaggeration to say that no one in this world knew more about refining corpses than he did. Other than being cunning and cautious, Qian Huan also had another identity. He was the first elder of the demonic Dao's corpse sect. Refining corpses was the corpse sect's ability to make a living. Who in the 10 continents and 3 islands knew more about refining corpses than the first elder of the corpse sect? The corpse sect had always had a special status in the demonic Dao. Even those in the demonic Dao usually stayed away from the corpse sect out of respect. Their strength was ranked at the top of the 10 sects. After all, when fighting with the corpse sect, one had to be careful not only of the corpse sect themselves, but also of their corpses. Some corpse sect madmen refined corpses that were even stronger than themselves. Other than spending all day with corpses, the corpse sect disciples' favorite thing to do was to dig graves. They especially liked to rob the graves of experts. After stealing the corpses, they would use secret techniques to refine them into powerful zombies and turn them into their own corpse puppets. For the opening of the Demon Emperor's cave this time, if not for the fact that the corpse sect was too far away and could not make it in time, all the experts in their sect would have come out in full force. It could be said that the corpse sect's ability to refine corpses was the best in the 10 continents. Other than those techniques that had been lost in inheritance as time passed, all kinds of techniques were constantly improving and perfecting. The corpse refining techniques of 3,000 years ago were naturally incomparable to those of today. If the Ninth Realm White Emperor 3,000 years ago had Qian Huan's experience in refining corpses and used some special techniques to refine his own corpses, then the newly awakened demon corpses in the White Emperor's cave would have at least been at the 7th realm, if not the 8th realm. Including Li Mu, everyone who entered the cave would have died. Li Mu had just obtained the White Emperor's memories and only found the method to control the cave. He did not have time to go through all of it. At this moment he focused on searching and quickly found out the origins of these 10 demon corpses. These 10 corpses were the 10 great demon generals under the White Emperor. Before the White Emperor died, he buried all the demon generals and demon soldiers under him with him. Those demon soldiers would be the first to wake up when an outsider entered the cave abode. They would drain the intruder's spiritual power and weaken their strength. At the same time, they would provide the White Emperor demonic corpse with food for the awakened White Emperor demonic corpse. They would also prevent intruders with full spiritual power from causing trouble for the awakened White Emperor demonic corpse. As for the awakening of the 10 great demon generals, they would also need to consume a large amount of blood. In order to prevent them from competing with his own demon corpses for blood and affecting his resurrection, Emperor Bai chose to seal the demon generals. He planned to awaken them after his own resurrection. This way the former demon generals would be able to serve him again. Of course, he didn't expect that Li Mu would use his glib tongue to cause a zombie that had just gained consciousness to suffer from schizophrenia. In the end, he forced out his memories, tore apart space, and escaped. He decided to live for himself in the future. Thus, the 10 great demon generals under his command were given to Li Mu. From the White Emperor's memories, 8 of the 10 great demon generals were level 7 spirit demons, and 2 were level 8 Xian demons. Level 8 Xian demons, regardless of whether they were humans or demons, were all super strong cultivators that dominated the continent. 3,000 years ago they were just buried with someone else. Li Mu was shocked. Zhou Yi saw through his thoughts and explained, 3,000 years ago the spiritual energy between heaven and earth was much denser than it is now. It was also easier to give birth to strong cultivators. Back then there were many level 9 humans and demons. In reality, after digesting part of the White Emperor's memories, Li Mu also realized that the spiritual energy between heaven and earth today was much thinner than it was 3,000 years ago. Based on this phenomenon, it wasn't hard to guess how dense the spiritual energy was 6,000 years ago, 9,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, or even in the previous epoch. It was no wonder that the number of strong cultivators was decreasing over the years even though cultivation techniques were improving. Perhaps in a few thousand years, it would be very difficult for cultivators on this continent to even advance to the middle 3 realms. However, all this had nothing to do with the present. Li Mu temporarily stored the 10 corpses in the Demon Emperor Palace. There was nothing in this dead space, so there was no possibility of them turning into corpses for the time being. Using blood to make the corpses develop consciousness was the lowest level of corpse refining method. If he used all kinds of treasures supplemented by the corpse nurturing formation, and refined using the corpse sex secret techniques, the White Emperor demon corpse's power would be much more than that when it awoke. However, refining them into demon corpses required a lot of preparation. Li Mu couldn't gather all the materials at the moment, so he needed to plan at length. His main task now was to remodel the Demon Emperor's cave abode. In the past 3,000 years, the ownerless Demon Emperor's cave abode was completely isolated from the outside world. This was the reason for the dead silence in this space. The first thing Li Mu had to do was to reconnect the cave abode with the outside world, allowing the spiritual energy and the power of heaven and earth from the outside world to gush in. This was the first step to restoring life to the Demon Emperor's cave abode. Li Mu's second step was to tear down the Demon Emperor Palace and the square in front of the palace. This huge building stood there alone like a huge tomb. And that was originally the White Emperor's tomb. Li Mu felt that it was inauspicious, so he quickly razed it to the ground. In addition, he also opened up a small lake in the cave abode, drawing in running water from the Bay of Clearwater, and brought in the fish and prawns in the water. While he was at it, he also moved Su He's small house by the water into the cave abode. The Empress was very happy to plant flowers and grass. She bought flower seeds from outside and planted a huge garden by the lake. With a wave of her sleeve, the lifeless ground became green like a cushion. She also used the leftover peach pits from the 2 of them to grow a peach forest in the distance. The saplings quickly broke through the ground, grew rapidly and bloomed white and red flowers. The cave abode looked brand new, but it still lacked some life. Thus, Li Mu caught some birds and a few rabbits from the forest. The grass had a few more white embellishments. The water was filled with fish and prawns, and the forest was filled with the fragrance of flowers. The sky was empty, so he pinched a few white clouds and floated in the sky. Zhou Yi looked at the clouds in the sky in the shape of various animals. She glanced at Li Mu and said, "Childish." Looking at the small space that the two of them had opened up together, Li Mu felt a sense of accomplishment. However, for the people of the North County, there were too many strange things happening around them these few days. First, the water level of the Gulf of Clear Water had inexplicably dropped by half. Then, the number of mountains in the vicinity had also decreased. The originally lush forest on the mountain had become barren overnight, as if someone had dug it out from the roots. Some people reported this strange matter to the government. After the government sent people to investigate, they couldn't find anything. In the end, they could only leave it as it was. Inside the Heavenly Flask cave abode, Li Mu lay on the grass beside the lake. He looked at the few wooden houses by the lake and felt the breeze from the lake. His entire person fell into an ethereal state. This originally dead cave abode had been turned into a paradise by him and the Empress. In the future there would be no need to find another place. In this place, isolated from the rest of the world, he could cultivate in peace. When he was lonely, he could leave the cave abode and travel the world. Wasn't this beautiful? Zhou Yi stood by the lake. The breeze moved the hair in front of her forehead. She reached out and combed a few strands of hair. She asked, "How many people do you have in your family? Why did you build so many houses here?" Li Mu said, "I built a few more. Sooner or later I will need them. Even if I don't live in them myself, it will be easy to arrange if a guest comes. Your Majesty, do you want to pick one? In the future, if your Majesty is bored in the palace, you can come visit me." Zhou Yi didn't stand on ceremony with Li Mu. She pointed at the house closest to the flower bed and said, "I want this one." The Empress was already adding furniture to her house. Dao Zhong was chasing birds in the forest. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the grass. He stretched out his hand and a simple page floated in his hand. This was the ultimate goal of everyone who entered the Demon Emperor's cave abode. Taoism called it the Tao page and the demon race called it the Heavenly Book. 3,000 years ago, the White Emperor passed down the demon race's orthodoxy through this page of the Heavenly Book. Li Mu closed his eyes and sank his consciousness into the page. In the next moment he came to a white world. This wasn't the first time he had experienced this. Li Mu closed his eyes and began to recite the Clear Heart chant. He didn't know how many times he recited it. When he opened his eyes again, the white fog in front of him had disappeared. His body was in a strange space. Li Mu sat cross-legged on the ground. The sky was filled with all kinds of huge figures. However, they weren't the monsters that Li Mu had seen in the pages of the Fulu school. The figures above his head were all monsters that Li Mu was familiar with. There were giant snakes that were thousands of feet long, giant bears that were hundreds of feet tall, giant wolves, and so on. There were more than 100 types of monsters. Each of them exuded an incomparably powerful aura. Li Mu looked around. He didn't see the monsters that he had seen before. Finally, he looked at a giant snake. In an instant, his vision blurred. He suddenly found himself floating in the air. He looked down and saw the body of a giant snake twisting and turning below. He himself had actually turned into that giant snake. At the same time, some information suddenly appeared in Li Mu's mind. Li Mu quickly realized that this was the cultivation method of the snake clan. Monsters were different from humans. Their monster body structures were different. Although they could cultivate by inhaling and exhaling spirit chi, each race had their own cultivation method that was most suitable for them. If they cultivated using a cultivation method that was suitable for them, they could achieve twice the results with half the effort. They could also unleash their full strength. However, before Li Mu had time to experience it, the giant snake let out a roar and flew up into the sky. At this moment, although Li Mu had the vision of the giant snake, he couldn't control its body. He could only continue to rise with the giant snake as if he wanted to fly with the snake into the sky. However, the higher the snake flew, the greater the resistance it encountered. Finally, it was suspended somewhere in the void, unable to take another step. Bang! The giant snake's body coiled up. It slammed its head into the sky, but it quickly fell back down. Bang! 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 Bang. Bang. It slammed into the sky again and again, falling down again and again. Its head was broken and bleeding, but it still didn't look back. Boom. When it slammed into the sky for the last time, it burned out all the monster power in its body. Its body exploded into a mass of flesh and blood. At the same time, Li Mu's consciousness rapidly fell. As if he had fallen in his sleep, Li Mu's body twitched on the grass in the White Emperor cave. He suddenly opened his eyes. His forehead was full of sweat and he was panting heavily. Chapter 4:14. Zhou Yi stood beside Li Mu and threw him a handkerchief. She asked, "What did you see?" Li Mu wiped his sweat with the handkerchief and gulped. He said, "Demons, many powerful demons." With the knowledge that Li Mu gained from Emperor Bai's memories, it was not difficult to determine that the demons in the Heavenly Book were all Ninth Realm heavenly demons. Although he was not sure if the scene in the Heavenly Book had really happened, the scene of the giant snake breaking through the sky left an unforgettable memory in Li Mu. Li Mu looked up at the sky. Although he often rode the wind and rode the clouds, he only flew 1,000 feet to 1,000 feet. He had never tried to fly to the highest point. In this world there were suns, moons, and stars. All kinds of phenomena showed that the ground under their feet was also a sphere. In principle, if they kept flying upwards, they should reach outer space. However, Li Mu had never seen any records of this. He looked at the Empress and asked, "Your Majesty, what is above the sky?" Zhou Yi said calmly, "You will know when you see it for yourself." After saying that, she put her hand on Li Mu's shoulder. The next moment the two left the cave and appeared in the real world. Zhou Yi grabbed Li Mu's shoulder and flew into the sky. Li Mu looked down and saw the ancestral home under his feet becoming smaller. Soon he could see the full view of Xianxia County. The people in carriages in the city were like ants. Soon they were above the clouds. Standing here and looking down, all one could see were clouds and mist. The surrounding air was extremely thin and the temperature was extremely low. Mortals who had never cultivated before wouldn't even be able to last the time it took to brew a cup of tea here. The Empress's hand was still on his shoulder. A warm feeling spread from her palm. Li Mu's discomfort quickly disappeared without a trace. Roughly estimating that they had flown up about 10,000 feet, Zhou Yi looked up and said, "If we go up, we will reach the 9 heavens hurricane layer." She grabbed Li Mu and ascended another 1,000 feet. As if crossing a certain boundary, Li Mu suddenly felt the pressure on his body multiply. The temperature here dropped drastically, and Li Mu had to channel his spiritual power to resist the cold. At the same time, there seemed to be a biting cold wind blowing from all directions. As the wind blew on his body, besides bringing about the cold, it also made his body feel like it was being cut by a knife. Li Mu even felt like his primordial spirit was about to be blown out of his body. Only when the Empress unleashed a protective barrier that enveloped the two of them did this feeling gradually disappear. The Empress led Li Mu upwards and the protective shield around them began to deform. After 10,000 meters, the Empress slowly came to a stop. "The higher we go, the stronger the astral winds are. With my cultivation base, I can only escort you up to this point." At this moment, the protective shield was already trembling slightly. Li Mu guessed that even a 6th realm cultivator would not be able to withstand the gales here. Further up, there would definitely be areas where even 7th realm cultivators would have to stop. It was almost impossible to fly into outer space with just one's physical body. The two of them were about to descend when they suddenly saw a golden light shining in the distance. In the 9 heavens astral wind layer, one could not fly as fast as when they were close to the ground. Zhou Yi led Li Mu for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before they reached the golden light. In front of Li Mu's eyes, a monk in a robe appeared. The monk floated in the 9 heavens astral wind layer, allowing the astral winds to blow over his body. The biting cold astral winds blew from all directions, and the monk's robes fluttered in the wind. However, his body remained as still as a mountain, emitting a faint glow in the 9 heavens astral wind layer. Li Mu was secretly shocked at the sight of this. The astral winds here were extremely fierce. If a Dongxian cultivator was exposed here, he would probably lose his physical body immediately. This monk could withstand the 9 heavens astral wind with just his body. How strong must his physical body be? As the two of them approached, the old monk slowly opened his eyes and looked at the Empress. A trace of surprise flashed in his eyes as he asked, "Are you the Empress of the Great Zhou?" Naturally, the Empress could not be the one to introduce herself. As the Empress's #1 lackey, Li Mu spoke on her behalf. "Yes, your majesty. May I ask for the great master's dharma name and where you cultivate?" The old monk braved the astral winds and put his palms together. He said, "Amitabha. Greetings, your majesty. I am Kong Ming, an old monk who wanders the world." Li Mu sized him up a few times and asked, "Grandmaster, are you cultivating in this 9 heavens astral wind layer?" The old monk smiled and said, "I have nothing to do, so I came up to polish my muscles and bones." It was the first time Li Mu heard of using the 9 heavens astral wind to polish one's muscles and bones. Although Buddhism cultivated the body, ordinary monks could not withstand it. This old monk was probably in the Prajna realm of Buddhism, a 7th realm master like the Empress Xianxia. While Li Mu was sizing up the old monk was also sizing up Li Mu. As he looked, a strange light suddenly appeared in his eyes and he said, "Young benefactor, you are fated with Buddhism. If you convert to Buddhism, you will definitely become a holy monk in the future." The Empress looked at him indifferently and said coldly, "Recite your sutras." This was the first sentence she said to the old monk and also the only sentence. After saying this, she grabbed Li Mu's shoulder, and the two of them descended rapidly. In a few breaths' time, Li Mu stood on the ground again. The rapid descent made him feel dizzy. His body swayed, and only by supporting the Empress did he not fall. Li Mu felt that although his body had returned to the ground, his soul was still in the sky. After calming himself down, Li Mu immediately let go of the Empress and said helplessly, "Your Majesty, don't be so fast next time." I can't take it," Zhou said. "I know." In the next few days the two of them spent a few more days in their own world. With the Empress's speed, it would take less than an hour to go from the North County to the divine capital, but she didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. She flew slowly with Li Mu along the way. When they reached a town, they would go down to rest, see the local customs, try the local snacks and shop for some local specialties. 10 days passed and they hadn't even finished half of the journey. Li Mu was quite anxious at first, but seeing that he wasn't. He treated it as accompanying her on a private tour. For the Empress, who had never left the divine capital before, the outside world was full of novelty. During this time, Li Mu tried many times to comprehend the heavenly book, possessed various monsters, and obtained many cultivation methods of the monster race. What Bai Di had comprehended back then was far less than what Li Mu had comprehended. The cultivation method that he had comprehended and passed down to the monster race was actually only one kind, and it was the cultivation method of the tiger race. However, he had made some improvements on this foundation so that all monsters could cultivate according to this method, but it was far from being able to unleash the special abilities of the various races. If Li Mu passed down the cultivation method of the monster race that he knew to the corresponding monster race, so that each of the major monster races would have their own cultivation method, the strength of the monster race would definitely rise to another level. Of course, this was tantamount to aiding the enemy, and Li Mu wouldn't nurture the enemy. Unfortunately, he didn't find the cultivation method of the fox race. Although the fox race was also a monster, their cultivation method was its own system. When the 9-tailed fox appeared, all the other monsters would retreat. Their cultivation method should be top-notch. Li Mu guessed that the heavenly book in the hands of the Lord of Illusions might contain the secret of the fox race. He wondered if there was a chance for Xiao Bai to get it. In addition, there was another matter that caused great doubt in Li Mu's heart. In the space where the page was, no matter what kind of monster race it was, their final choice would be the end of the sky. It was as if there was something there that was attracting them. For this reason, these monster race experts were even willing to give up their lives. Li Mu knew nothing about this. At the end of the sky, above the 9 heavens hurricane, what exactly was attracting them? Perhaps only they knew. Even Li Mu couldn't find the answer from Emperor Bai's memories. Similarly, the enormous monster he saw in the talisman puppet sex Dao page was also an unsolved mystery in his heart. After wandering outside for more than half a month, Li Mu and the Empress finally returned to Chengdu. The officials were notified that tomorrow's morning court would be held as usual. It seemed that His Majesty's seclusion had ended. Cultivators of the 7th realm could easily go into seclusion for months or even years. Half a month of seclusion was nothing. Surprisingly, Li Mu, who had disappeared for a long time, also appeared at this morning court. The officials didn't know what he had been doing. They only guessed that he was out on a mission with the consecrators. Someone tried to inquire through the consecrators department but didn't find anything. In the consecrators department, The sloppy Taoist priest had his hands behind his back. He looked around at everyone and said, "Remember this. You didn't see or hear anything. Don't talk nonsense when you go out. Otherwise, don't blame me for being ruthless." After returning to the Changle Palace, Li Mu gave the black fox tail that he had plundered from Phantom Princess to Xiao Bai. The weapon in her hand was given to her by Li Mu. Without a doubt, the black fox tail could only unleash its greatest power in the hands of the Fox clan. Xiao Bai loved this new magic treasure very much. Li Mu also took out an elixir that he had plundered from the Demon Palace. With the help of the Empress, Xiao Bai successfully evolved 5 tails. In terms of cultivation, both Li Mu and the Empress could only help her up to this point. She had to complete every step on her own. Li Mu thought of an important matter. He called Xiao Bai in front of him and asked, "Does the Heavenly Fox clan always seek revenge and repay kindness?" Xiao Bai nodded solemnly. Li Mu asked again, "What if there is a person who has both a favor and a grudge against you?" Xiao Bai was stunned for a moment. She didn't seem to expect this situation. She said in confusion, "Well, I don't know." At this time Wan, who had been eavesdropping, trotted over and said, I know. First I will repay his kindness with my body. Then I will have a bunch of children with him. Every day I will beat his children for revenge." Chapter 4:15. "You're such a clever girl." Li Mu knocked on Wan's head. Looking at her aggrieved look, he could not help but reach out and rub her head. The Heavenly Fox clan clearly distinguished between kindness and hatred. Kindness was kindness, hatred was hatred. It was impossible for them to forget their kindness and hatred with a bang. Moreover, Li Mu already had a fox at home. He had never thought of having a baby with a wild fox outside. As a member of the Heavenly Fox clan, he was a little curious about Little White's choice in this matter. He looked at Little White again and asked, "Little White, if I had a grudge with you before I saved you, what would you have done?" Little White said without hesitation, "Benefactor, how could you have a grudge with me?" Li Mu said, "This is just a hypothesis." Little White shook her head and said firmly, "There is no such hypothesis." It was indeed difficult for Little White to imagine this matter. Li Mu did not make things difficult for her. After reviewing a few memorials on the table, he returned to the harem to rest. Although he said he was resting, he was actually digesting his gains this time. Whether it was the page of the Heavenly Book or the White Emperor's memory, they were not things that Li Mu could completely digest in a short time. In these days he had already learned more than 10 cultivation methods of the demon race. He could refine elixirs that could help demons increase their cultivation and break through realms. He also knew many demonic skills. As long as he had enough time, strengthening the demon race was just around the corner. It was a pity that he was a human. He had the abilities of the demon race, but he had nowhere to use them. This feeling was not good. He temporarily suppressed the feelings in his chest. Li Mu calmed down and began to silently chant the Heart Sutra. In the early stages of cultivation, Li Mu envied the strength of Xuandu's physical body and wanted to cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism. In cultivation, Taoism cultivated the primordial spirit and Buddhism cultivated the physical body. Ordinary people could only choose one, but when Li Mu encountered a choice, he would usually consider whether he could have both. Later he gradually realized that just cultivating one had almost exhausted all his energy. The idea of cultivating both Buddhism and Taoism could only be put on hold indefinitely. Now he had already taken all the shortcuts he could take in Haotian Taoism. If he wanted to go further, he needed hard work and opportunities. It was not something that could be done overnight. However, he could restart his previous plan. If his Buddhist cultivation could keep up, he would not have been defeated by Phantasmagoria in the White Emperor Cave. In order to avoid similar situations in the future, he had to make up for his shortcomings as soon as possible. The first 3 realms of Buddhist cultivation only required diligent recitation of sutras. Stimulated by Phantasmagoria, Li Mu began to cultivate diligently. For half a day he locked himself in his room and did not come out. There was still some time before Xianxi's disciple recruitment ceremony. Li Qing was in seclusion, so he was in no hurry to go to White Cloud Mountain. This period of time should be enough for him to achieve a breakthrough in his Buddhist dharma. During dinner, the Empress asked him what he was doing in the room for so long. Li Mu answered honestly. Zhou Yi asked, "Are you going to cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Both Buddhism and Taoism have their own strengths and weaknesses. If I cultivate at the same time, I can learn from each other." Anyway, it's difficult for me to make a big breakthrough in my cultivation. It's better to cultivate Buddhism first. This was one of the reasons. The other reason was that he was stimulated by phantasmagoria. As a fox, she could cultivate both demon dharma and Taoism to a high level. Li Mu was not willing to be behind phantasmagoria. Although phantasmagoria was the second generation of the demon dharma, Li Mu's own conditions were not bad. Not to mention the talent of the pure yang body, he also had the Fugu school as his backer. At the same time, he was also holding the Empress's thigh tightly. There was no reason for him to lose to a fox. Zhou Xian nodded and said, "Since you've made up your mind, this is for you." She waved her hand and a golden light flew out of her hand. Li Mu caught it and found that it was a stone about half the size of a palm. It was emitting a faint golden light. The stone was a little heavy, and Li Mu soon found that the golden light emitted from the stone was the light of Buddha. He seemed to realize something and asked, "Is this a Buddhist saraira?" The Empress nodded and said, "This was left behind by an eminent monk of the Heart sect after he passed away. At that time, in order to build temples in various counties, they gave the saraira of an eminent monk to the imperial court. The Buddhist saraira was a treasure left behind by an eminent monk with profound dharma after he passed away. In the saraira there was their life's spiritual power. If a mortal had this treasure, they would be immune to all diseases and demons and ghosts. At the same time, this was a rare material. After it was ground into powder, it could replace some precious natural treasures and be used to write the holy talisman. Of course, to a Buddhist cultivator, the saraira of an eminent monk was even more useful. The saraira was the condensation of the eminent monk's life's dharma. Before they passed away, they would condense their life's spiritual power into a saraira and leave it to their descendants. This was also a kind of dharma inheritance. As long as their descendants absorbed the spiritual power in the saraira, they would be able to avoid years or even decades of bitter cultivation. However, it was impossible to retain all the spiritual power in the saraira. It was already rare for an eminent monk to leave 10% or 20% of his spiritual power and condense it into a saraira before he passed away. Even so, to a low-level cultivator, it was a great fortune. If it were someone else, Li Mu might be polite with such a precious gift. However, there was no need for any extra politeness between him and the Empress. Li Mu could sell his life for her and accept such a precious gift from her peacefully. After passing away, the eminent monk who could leave behind a saraira was at least in the 7th realm. Even if this saraira only contained 10% of his spiritual power, it was still a huge amount for Li Mu. With this item, Li Mu's dharma cultivation improved rapidly. In just a few days he broke through to the 3rd realm. He was not far from the 4th realm, the golden body. If he absorbed all the spiritual power in this saraira, it was inevitable that he would cultivate the golden body. However, he could not be too hasty. Li Mu's improvement was too fast. He needed to completely stabilize his current realm before he could try to break through. His physical body did not seem to have any changes. However, when Li Mu used the Bai sword to gently slash it, only a white mark appeared on his arm. He channeled his spiritual power and slashed it again. Only then did a shallow cut appear on his arm. However, the wound healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. It quickly disappeared without a trace. This was only in the 3rd realm. When he cultivated the golden body combined with the fighting formula, he would be able to fight in close combat or from a distance. His strength would no longer have an obvious shortcoming. The problem that needed to be solved now was that although Li Mu's spiritual power had caught up with the eminent monk's saraira, it had not completely merged with his physical body. For Buddhist cultivators who cultivated step by step, their spiritual power was hidden in their physical body. Their physical body grew stronger as their spiritual power grew. Li Mu's spiritual power grew too fast. Much of it was still wandering in his physical body. He could not unleash the full power of his physical body. The fastest way to merge the two was to fight. Unfortunately, Li Mu did not have any friends who cultivated Buddhism. Although Mr. Mei and Shangguanli had enough cultivation, their bodies could not take more than a few punches. The Empress could fight him in close combat, but the difference in their strength was too great. It could not be used as a training ground. Moreover, Li Mu did not want to be ravaged by the Empress again. He did not want to personally experience her strength every day. It would cause him to have strange and embarrassing dreams at night. Li Mu thought hard. Suddenly, a light flashed through his mind. He remembered the monk that he and the Empress met in the 9 heavens atmosphere. The nine heavens atmosphere was a natural place to train one's body. Every 10 feet higher, the atmosphere's power would increase by 1 level. One could choose the position and height according to the intensity of the atmosphere's power. They were constantly challenging their limits. When their strength increased, they could challenge higher positions and continue to challenge new limits. 2 hours later. In the nine heavens atmosphere above Shen-Du. At the bottom of the atmosphere, 2 figures sat cross-legged some distance apart. Li Mu's body was completely exposed to the astral wind. He allowed the astral wind to hit him. Not far away, Shangguanli used his dermic powers to prop up a shield, trying his best to keep the astral wind out of his body. 2 hours ago, when Li Mu proposed his idea to the Empress, Shangguanli insisted on following. Whether it was to train one's body or to hone one's spiritual power, this place was a natural treasure. It could constantly squeeze the limits of one's body and spiritual power. Every time one broke through the atmosphere, they would enter a new world. But this process was not easy. The temperature here was extremely low. When the atmosphere blew on one's body, it was like a knife. One's body was under great pressure. If it were immortal here, it was equivalent to being dismembered at every moment. Li Mu's body emitted a faint golden light in the cold wind. When the atmosphere blew, the golden light on his body dimmed. Soon it lit up again. The cycle repeated. Under this extreme pressure, the Buddhist spiritual power in his body began to merge with his body. At a certain moment, he opened his eyes and glanced at Shangguanli. He found that she was also bitterly holding on. Shangguanli and Li Mu were the same. Both of their cultivations had been greatly improved through shortcuts. Whether it was experience or the purity of their spiritual power, they were not as good as a true manifestation realm cultivator. The atmosphere of the nine heavens was a rare cultivation treasure for them. However, even at the bottom of the atmosphere was not weak. Li Mu and Shangguanli resisted for 15 minutes before they both reached their limits. Zhou Yi waved her sleeves and brought the 2 of them out of the atmosphere and back to the palace. At this moment, Li Mu and Shangguanli's hair was covered with a layer of white frost. The atmosphere was cold and penetrated to the bone. If one stayed for too long, even a cultivator would be frozen to death. Shangguanli glanced at Li Mu. The 2 of them had experienced life and death together and had been through the atmosphere together. They could be said to have gone through thick and thin together. The distance between them was quickly pulled closer. She looked at Li Mu and took the initiative to speak, which was rare for her. She said, "The atmosphere is still cold. It will last for a long time. Find a warm place and use your spiritual power to expel the cold." With that, Little White and Wanwan ran out of the palace. When they saw Li Mu's pale face from the cold, they both showed a pained expression. Wanwan held Li Mu's hand and blew on it. She placed it on her face and asked, "Young master, is it warmer now?" Little White held Li Mu's other hand and urged, "Benefactor, why is your body so cold? Let's go back to the room and warm your body." Shangguanli watched as Li Mu was escorted away by the 2 girls. She stood on the spot for a long time, put her palms together, breathed a few times and then hugged her body tightly. Chapter 416. Mr. Mei looked at Shangguanli from afar and sighed. "Now do you know the benefits of having someone by your side?" Shangguanli's body was still trembling slightly. She said lightly, "That's all there is to it." Mr. Mei shook his head. "You're already so cold, yet you're still so stubborn. Girl, come, let me hug you and warm you up." Although the astral winds were bone-chilling with Wanwan and Xiao Bai's blanket, it was warm to the heart. It was so warm that it was a little depraved. When he thought about how Li Qing was cultivating in seclusion while he was here, enjoying Wanwan and Xiao Bai warming his bed, Li Mu felt that he was really too depraved. After some self-reflection, he felt that he could not go on like this. He pulled his arms out of Wanwan and Xiao Bai's embrace, sat cross-legged on the bed, and continued to comprehend the heavenly book. At this time, after many days of fermenting, the news of the demon emperor Baidi's cave abode had finally spread. The 6 Daoist sects, the 4 demonic sects, the demon kings, and even the great Zhou court had all participated in the fight for the demon emperor's cave abode. Although most people did not know the final result, one could imagine that with so many factions and countless experts, there was only one heavenly book and one Baidi's inheritance. No matter who obtained it in the end, there would definitely be an extremely fierce fight. During this period of time, the actions of the various large forces all proved this point. Within the demon nation, the bear tribe, the snake tribe, the wolf tribe, and the leopard tribe suddenly formed an alliance. Before this, there were many conflicts between the various demon kings because of territorial disputes, and there were no signs of an alliance. After the 4 demon kings formed an alliance, some news also spread within their demon nation. It was said that in the fight for the demon emperor's cave, the 4 demon kings had suffered heavy losses. The demon generals that they had sent out were almost completely annihilated. In order to avoid being swallowed up by the other demon kings after their strength was greatly damaged, they had no choice but to form an alliance. As for the demon Dao demon sect in the demon nation, they had always been arrogant and had constantly swallowed up the surrounding small demon tribes to expand their own forces. However, in recent days, they had suddenly become much more well-behaved. Not only had their forces shrunk, but the demons that used to rely on the demon sect as their backing had also become terrified. This also confirmed some of the rumors that had spread from the territories of the Bear King and the Snake King. It was said that the demon sect had sent 5 5th-level demon generals into the White Emperor Cave, but none of them had returned. The demon sect head elder had lost half of his capable subordinates. It was no wonder that the demon sect had suddenly become obedient. At the same time, in the faraway Yudu Ghost region, Soul Sect, the 2 soul shadows stood in Soul Palace and looked at each other. 2 years ago, the Soul Sect had a 6th-level Great Elder, and below him were the 10 Kings of Hell. Each of their cultivations were above the 5th level. Since Chu Jiang of Gojoseon had died in the North County, King Wuguan, Emperor Song, and the Great Elder Nether Saint had all died in the hands of Li Mu. The Soul Sect's strength had been greatly damaged. In this fight for the Demon Emperor's Cave, King Qingguang had sent out 5 Kings of Hell. In the end, not a single one of the 5 Kings of Hell had returned. The once glorious Soul Sect had countless experts. Now only King Qingguang, who had been forcefully raised to the 6th level, and the King of Chakravarti of the 10 Kings of Hell were left. They had completely fallen to the bottom of the 10 sects. If other forces in the Ghost region had encountered such a setback, the surrounding Ghost Kings who were eyeing them covetously would have been unable to sit still. The only outcome for them was to be swallowed up and divided up. However, no matter how weak the Soul Sect was, it was still one of the 10 sects of the Demon Dao. With the giant tree of the Demon Dao behind them, no forces in the Ghost region dared to swallow them up. The main reason was that they themselves could not accept the decline of the Soul Sect. King Qingguang said in a deep voice, "We must recruit some experts as soon as possible. Otherwise the Soul Sect will only exist in name." The King of Chakravarti shook his head. The 5th-level spirits of the Ghost region have already been absorbed by various forces. We can't snatch them from them. The major forces in the Ghost region did not dare to touch the Soul Sect because they were afraid of the Demon Dao. However, if the Soul Sect came knocking on their door, they would not be polite. With the Soul Sect's current strength, they could not afford to offend anyone. King Qingguang said, "Not all the spirits have joined the major forces. I heard that there is a female spirit in the West Mountain who has just become a spirit. A year ago, the east of the May Mountain was also occupied by a 5th-level soul cultivator." The King of Chakravarti thought for a while and said, "Great Elder said that Madame Lin of the West Mountain and the powerful existence of the May Mountain." King Qingguang said, "It's them." The King of Chakravarti shook his head. Half a year ago, King Taishan was ordered by the saint to invite Madame Lin, but she rejected him. The one in the May Mountain is extremely powerful. King Pingdang and I went to invite her, but we did not even get to see her face. King Pingdang was almost killed by her because he spoke rudely. If I did not mention the name of the saint at the critical moment, the 2 of us would not have made it back." King Qingguang frowned and asked, "The 2 of you almost died before you even got to see her face. Could it be that the soul cultivator has already reached the 6th level?" "No." The King of Chakravarti said. "Her cultivation is not much stronger than ours, but her remarkable ability is really terrifying." "It is simply unheard of," King Qingguang asked. "What kind of remarkable ability?" The King of Chakravarti said, "She can make snow fall in a 10-mile radius. The snow is bone-chilling and can harm souls. She can also control lightning, which is very effective against us." King Qingguang's eyes flashed as he said, "She does have some ability. If I can subdue her, wouldn't I have another helper by my side? I definitely can't let this girl go. However, before subduing her, I need to go meet Madame Lin." As soon as he finished speaking, his body turned into a cloud of gray mist and left the Hall of Souls, flying towards the west. At the same time, a certain matter caused a stir in the demonic path. The reward for the second arrest of Li Mu by the Lord of Illusions was even more generous than the first. Anyone who could capture this person alive would become the personal disciple of the Lord of Illusions and wield the heavenly tomes for a year. After all, the previous reward for Li Mu was only to guide his cultivation and help him comprehend the heavenly tomes once. To become the personal disciple of the Lord of Illusions and be given a year to comprehend the heavenly tomes. This was not a recruitment of a disciple, but a recruitment of a son-in-law. This benefit did not seem like it was for an outsider. Everyone knew that the Lord of Illusions had a beautiful and talented daughter. If one could become the personal disciple of the Lord of Illusions, there was a high chance, no, a 90% chance, that one could marry the Lord of Illusions and become a family with the Lord of Illusions. As soon as this news spread, it caused a heated discussion in the demonic path. What did that Li Mu do to make the Lord of Illusions put a bounty on him? This is the second time he has put a bounty on him. Did he sleep with the Lord of Illusions' daughter? The Lord of Illusions loves Princess Illusions very much. I think it's possible. No, I must kill Li Mu. It's not to become the personal disciple of the Lord of Illusions or to comprehend the heavenly tomes. The main thing is that I can't tolerate him sullying Princess Illusions. Forget it. The Lord of Illusions said that he only wants him alive. Why is it so much harder to capture him alive than dead? The Lord of Illusions' bounty for Li Mu was not only limited to the demonic path. No matter if it was the demon race, ghost race or human race, as long as they could bring Li Mu to him alive, they would be rewarded by the Lord of Illusions. As for why the Lord of Illusions only wanted him alive, everyone speculated. In the end, they all agreed that it was because Li Mu had abandoned Princess Illusions and angered the Lord of Illusions. The Lord of Illusions must have planned to use extremely cruel methods to torture him after capturing him alive. In the Chang'e Palace, Zhou Yi was holding a secret report from the demon sect. He looked at Li Mu and said with interest, "The spies from the demon sect said that you made the Lord of Illusions' daughter pregnant. The Lord of Illusions has put a bounty on you in the Zhou continent. The person who captures you alive will become his personal disciple and will have 1 year to comprehend a page of the heavenly tomes. When did the thing between you and that fox happen?" Wanwan was so shocked that her mouth was wide open. She didn't even realize that the candy in her hand had fallen out. Xiaobai was in a daze. Thinking that her benefactor already had another fox outside, she suddenly felt that her life was bleak. Could it be that her benefactor's love for her would disappear? Chapter 417. A bunch of nonsense. After Li Mu reacted, his face revealed a look of anger as he said, "Who sent back this false information? That person is not responsible at all. It's fine if it's just a fabricated rumor, but if this is an important battle report, how many things will be delayed and how much damage will be caused to the imperial court? His bonus for this year is gone." Zhou Yi put down the report and lightly said, "This matter has already spread throughout the entire demonic path. Anyone can find out about it." Li Mu raised his head to look at her and said, "Your Majesty, please believe this subject. This subject is loyal to my wife and is not." No matter how thick-skinned Li Mu was, he could not say the word loyal. He could not even say promiscuous. Otherwise, where would he place Li Qing, Little White and Wanwan? He lightly coughed and said, "This subject is loyal to your Majesty. How can I have an affair with a demonic path witch? It's even more impossible to impregnate her. This is a rumor, a scandal. This subject has Little White by his side. How can I provoke other foxes?" Little White's face revealed a bashful expression. She felt that her benefactor's love for her had returned. Zhou Yi flicked her finger and a flame flew out, burning the report to ashes. She said, all right. This emperor believes you. Go back to work." Li Mu walked out of Chang'e Palace and slowly exhaled. This heavenly lord of 10,000 illusions was truly endless. Not to mention the demonic path people, even Li Mu himself was moved by the bounty this time. Li Mu was not interested in becoming the direct disciple of the myriad illusion heaven monarch or marrying Phantasmagoria. However, Li Mu was very curious about the page of the heavenly book in the myriad illusion heaven monarch's hands. It was said that the complete heavenly book had a total of 24 pages. Contained the great Tao of heaven and earth. Li Mu had comprehended 2 of the pages and obtained the inheritance of the talisman Tao and the demonic Tao. At the same time, the images left behind in the heavenly book also left a deep impression on Li Mu. What were those giant beasts? Why did the demonic cultivators bang their heads against the sky? What other mysteries were there in the other heavenly books? As the most legendary treasure in the world, there were too many legends about the heavenly book. However, without a doubt, once one comprehended the complete heavenly book, one would be able to see the great Tao of this world and uncover the mysteries of the ancient times. These two things attracted Li Mu much more than phantasmagoria. He wondered if the heaven monarch of myriad illusions would keep his promise and allow him to comprehend the page of the heavenly book in his hands if he surrendered himself and brought Li Mu back alive. Li Mu thought about it carefully and felt that this possibility was not big, so he completely dispelled this idea. 100,000 Great Mountains, where the Mirage faction was located. The myriad illusions lord handed a simple page to Phantasmagoria and said, "If you can't comprehend more, then don't force yourself." Phantasmagoria nodded and said, "I understand." She took the page and sank her consciousness into it. Soon she appeared in an empty space. This space was filled with a boundless fog. She could only see a few steps away from her. The fog would occasionally tumble as if something was flying past at high speed. Phantasmagoria calmed her heart and focused her mind. She tried to use her mind to disperse the fog. The fog in front of her seemed to have thinned a little. A white figure suddenly passed through the fog. It was a white fox with two tails. Phantasmagoria's gaze swept past the fox demon and continued to disperse the fog. This page of the heavenly book contained the inheritance of the Fox clan. Although the Fox clan was also demonic, their cultivation was different from that of the demonic cultivators. The ancestors of the Fox clan had opened up a completely different cultivation path for them. The weak Fox clan, when cultivated to the peak, could become the king of the demonic cultivators. They had heaven demons as subordinates and heaven dragons as mounts. However, as the heaven foxes fell one after another, no new heaven foxes were born. The Fox clan gradually declined. The fog in front of her gradually thinned. More and more fox shadows flew past Phantasmagoria's eyes. These foxes were two-tailed, three-tailed, four-tailed, and one of them was five-tailed. Phantasmagoria's face still did not reveal a satisfied expression. 3 years ago, she was able to obtain the inheritance of the five-tailed fox demon from the heavenly book. Until now, she had not met a six-tailed fox. Back then, her father had obtained the inheritance of the seven-tailed fox by chance. That was why he had the strength and status he had today. If she could meet a six-tailed fox spirit and obtain its inheritance, she would be able to advance to six-tailed at the fastest speed possible. Unfortunately, to obtain this level of inheritance besides strength, she also needed luck. The Heaven Lord of Illusions looked at Phantasmagoria, who was immersed in the heavenly book, and silently walked out of the cave. He looked at a disciple of the Mirage faction and asked, "Have you found the Demon Emperor's spiritual corpse?" The disciple shook his head and said, "Heaven Lord, we have not found any traces of it." The Heaven Lord of Illusions said calmly, "Continue to search." The heavenly book had fallen into Li Mu's hands. This was an unchangeable fact. However, possessing the heavenly book only gave one the possibility to become a powerhouse. Could not immediately make one a powerhouse. The 6 Daoist sects all had heavenly books. Their strongest powerhouses were only in the 7th realm. What's more, the heavenly book of the demon clan was useless to the human clan. However, the demon emperor's corpse was different. It was the corpse of a heavenly demon. If it was handed over to the corpse sect and refined, even if it could not restore his peak strength, it would certainly create a powerhouse in the upper realm. This was more beneficial than the heavenly book. Yingzhou bordered the northeast of the ancestral continent. There were many mountains and poisonous barriers in the territory. Although the territory was vast, there were no human countries. There were only poisonous insects and beasts everywhere. The trees and flowers that could survive here were generally highly poisonous. Very few people knew that the corpse sect of the 10 demonic sects was in Yingzhou. Among the 10 demonic sects, the corpse sect was the most repulsive. Although the soul sect and the demon sect had committed all kinds of evil, ghosts were the souls of humans and demons were also living beings. They shared the same emotions as humans. In some novels, love between humans and ghosts, or between humans and demons, transcending life and death and transcending races, happened from time to time. However, no one had ever written a story about humans and corpses. After all, in the eyes of most people, Zombies were inhumane creatures that only knew how to suck blood and bite people. They were more terrifying than demons and ghosts. The people of the corpse sect spent all day with corpses. Just thinking about it made them shudder. Not only the righteous sects but even the demonic sects did not like the corpse sect. Their bodies were always filled with thick corpse chi and they were always thinking about the bodies of others. If a powerhouse of the demonic sects died and his corpse was still intact, the people of the corpse sect would take the initiative to come and ask for the corpse. If a powerhouse was about to die, they would come in advance and wait to receive their corpse. They did not care about the feelings of the dying person. Therefore, in the demonic sects, the corpse sect was like a jinx. In Yingzhou, in a hollow mountain somewhere, there was a burst of shock. What? The White Thearcha's cave abode has appeared. There are countless demon corpses from 3,000 years ago inside. The White Thearcha's corpse is also inside. That's the corpse of a ninth realm powerhouse. It's something that can't be found even in a few hundred years. Why didn't you say so earlier? If I can use a ninth realm corpse as material to refine a spirit corpse in this life, even if I die, it'll be worth it. Figures sat cross-legged on the stone platform in the cave. Although they were all humans, their bodies were filled with thick corpse chi. This was not because they were about to die but because they spent all day with corpses. Below the stone platform was an extremely wide platform. On the platform, hundreds of corpses stood neatly. The entire cave was filled with corpse chi. The figures on the stone platform were all filled with regret. Refining a ninth realm demon corpse was something they did not even dare to dream of. Every corpse sect disciple saw this as their life's ultimate goal. Everyone sighed and lamented that they missed the chance to obtain a ninth realm demon corpse. I heard that many people died in the demon emperor's cave abode. It's a pity that their corpses. When are those old fellows from the various sects going to die? Wouldn't it be great if we could have a seventh realm corpse to practice on? I wonder if the great elder is really dead. It's a pity that his corpse was not left behind. Even if it's not a seventh realm corpse, a peak sixth realm corpse would suffice. With the great elder's sinister intelligence, how could he die so easily? It's not like it's the first time he died. His longest death was when he disappeared for 10 years before reappearing. Not even 2 years have passed. Who knows, he might come back on his own one day. Demon Emperor's cave abode. Li Mu looked at the 10 demon corpses in front of him, deep in thought. 3,000 years ago, the spirit chi of heaven and earth was dense and powerful cultivators were everywhere. As subordinates of the demon emperor, even the weakest of the 10 demons was at Xianxia's current level of cultivation. If he followed the corpse sect's top-notch corpse refining techniques, he could at least refine 6th realm demon corpses. 2 of them even had hopes of reaching 7th realm. Of course, demon corpses of this level were not easy to refine. The amount of materials needed to refine them was enormous. Li Mu had asked Xianxia and the Empress. The materials he needed could not be gathered even if Mount Baiyun and the imperial court combined. When he thought of this, Li Mu's gaze involuntarily turned to the northeast. That was the direction of Yingzhou. Very few people knew that the corpse sect's headquarters was in the deserted Yingzhou. When it came to refining corpses, the corpse sect was undoubtedly the most professional. With thousands of years of accumulation, they had all the materials Li Mu needed there. Li Mu thought for a moment and the aura on his body suddenly changed. The Empress, who was reading a book lazily in her chair, looked up and glanced at him asking, "What are you doing?" Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Don't worry about me, Your Majesty. I'm going to practice in advance." Chapter 418. The question of, "Who am I?" that the White Emperor Demon Corpse had once struggled with was actually not completely meaningless. At this moment, sitting in Chang'e Palace was Li Mu, the Thousand Illusions Venerable, and the Demon Emperor White Emperor. He had the memories of the Thousand Illusions Venerable and the White Emperor, knew all their secrets and knew everyone they knew. With this, he could flawlessly pretend that he had been possessed by the Thousand Illusions Venerable or the White Emperor. If he said he was the corpse sect's Grand Elder, then he was the corpse sect's Grand Elder. Compared to the Thousand Illusions Venerable being possessed, most people were more willing to believe that he had possessed someone else. Although the corpse sect was also one of the 10 demonic sects, they were not interested in anything other than tomb raiding and refining corpses. Li Mu and the Empress had worked hard to turn the Demon Emperor's cave into a paradise. The mountains were green, the water was green, and the flowers were fragrant. However, there were always 10 corpses that had been dead for 3,000 years. Every time Li Mu thought about it, he felt uncomfortable. Rather than letting them gather dust in the cave, it was better to send them to the corpse sect and let the corpse refiners help refine them. At the same time, it saved Li Mu a lot of manpower and resources. However, the premise of all this was to make them believe that Li Mu was the Thousand Illusions Venerable. It was not difficult to do this, but he did not want to expose his true identity. The art of transformation was a mystical power that only level 6 cultivators were qualified to learn. Even if Li Mu used the false appearance talisman, he could not guarantee that there would be no flaws. He closed his eyes and searched in his mind. When he opened his eyes again, his face changed. Soon he had become a stranger. This was not a Daoist mystical power but a demon technique. The false appearance mystical power was an illusory technique that was cast with spells. If it met someone with a high cultivation, they would be seen through at a glance. On the other hand, this demon technique that had been lost with the fall of the White Emperor could change one's appearance without leaving a trace. Of course, demon techniques had their advantages, but Daoist techniques also had their limitations. The Dao sect's divine ability allowed one to transform into any appearance they wished with the help of Dharma spells. Regardless of whether it was a person's face, a rock, a wooden stake, a cow, or a dog, there was nothing it could not do. Demonic arts were not so random. At most, they could change their appearance but not their figure. If they wanted to change into the appearance of anyone, they would need to cultivate to a high level. It seemed that Dao arts were stronger, but Dao arts were essentially illusions. All illusions had the risk of being seen through. As for this demonic technique, even though there were many limitations when it was executed, it would leave no traces behind after the transformation, making it difficult for others to notice. There was also the invisibility spell. The Daoist invisibility spell could hide one's body, clothes, weapons, magic treasures, all the accessories on one's body, and any external objects that the caster wanted to hide. They were both invisible, but demonic arts were not as magical. It could only hide the caster's body, hair, and skin. It did not include clothes or any other external objects. In other words, if he wanted to become invisible through demonic arts, he would have to strip naked from head to toe. This seemed to be a useless spell, but it was very difficult to completely hide one's aura and spiritual power. Once any spiritual power fluctuations were revealed, even if others couldn't see it with the naked eye, they would be able to perceive their existence. As for the invisibility spell, it was born from a certain lizard's innate divine ability. It didn't consume any spiritual power at all, so naturally, there would be no spiritual power fluctuations. Not only could it make people disappear out of thin air, but it could also integrate with any surrounding environment without any disharmony. Even a powerhouse of the upper realm wouldn't be able to discover it. Li Mu comprehended a lot of demonic arts from Baidi's memory, and he first learned these two practical ones. The art of disguise that would not be discovered by others allowed him to act with another identity without exposing himself. As for the invisibility spell, although the casting conditions were a bit awkward in the face of a life and death crisis, or some incomparably critical moment, who would care about wearing clothes or not? Of course, with Li Mu's caution, he would not joke about his own safety without confirmation. The transformation spell would not be exposed. Li Mu had already confirmed this through the Empress. As for the other one, it was inconvenient for him to take the initiative to look for the Empress. Li Mu thought for a while and returned to his room. A moment later, Wan and Xiao Bai, who were sitting cross-legged on the bed, suddenly found that the door of their room was pushed open. Xiao Bai turned her head and took a look and said in surprise, "Why is the door open? Is it the wind?" Wan turned her head to look and quickly turned back and said, "It should be the wind, it's your turn. Whoever wins this game will sleep inside tonight." Li Mu walked out of Wan and Xiao Bai's room. It seemed that the demonic arts from 3,000 years ago were indeed something. Xiao Bai couldn't see through it, but even Wan, who had a small success in her spiritual pupils, couldn't discover him after he was invisible. On the bed in the room, Xiao Bai finished moving the chess pieces and inadvertently looked at Wan and asked in confusion, "What's wrong with you? Why is your color so red?" After coming out of their room, Li Mu's confidence increased a little. He was barefoot and using the demonic arts that originated from the cat race, he walked silently. He walked to the entrance of Changle Palace and saw Shangguanli, who was standing guard outside. He reached out and waved his hand in front of her eyes, but Shangguanli didn't react at all. Even she couldn't discover him. Li Mu became bolder and walked into Changle Palace. The Empress was reading a book. At this moment, there was no one in the palace, and she was lying on the dragon throne in an even more languid posture than usual. The dragon throne was very big, almost half the size of a bed. The Empress's posture revealed her graceful figure even more. She usually wore a loose dragon robe which didn't reveal her figure. It was only at this moment that Li Mu realized that the Empress actually had such an impressive figure. He walked around the palace, and the Empress was still quietly reading her book as if she didn't discover anything. This meant that Li Mu could also hide his figure without leaving any traces in front of other Seventh Realm cultivators. He frantically tested the Empress a few more times at the edge of danger, but the Empress still didn't react. Li Mu's heart was completely at ease. Just as he was about to leave, the Empress suddenly put down the book in her hand. She skillfully formed a hand seal. Li Mu recognized this hand seal. It was the Mystic Light Technique's hand seal. Why did she use the Mystic Light Technique for no reason? Was she trying to spy on someone? At this moment, Li Mu was also somewhat curious. He looked up at the image displayed by the Mystic Light Technique and couldn't help but be stunned. The image was actually Changle Palace. Li Mu was confused. What was the Empress doing? Was she spying on herself? At the same time, Zhou Yi's face also showed confusion. As if realizing something, she looked in a certain direction corresponding to the Mystic Light Technique. At the end of her line of sight, the invisible Li Mu met the Empress's gaze, and his heart skipped a beat. Zhou Yi stood up and asked in confusion, "What kind of technique is this? Even I can't see through it. How did you do it?" Li Mu's awkward voice came from the void. "Your Majesty, it's not very convenient for me right now. I'll come back and explain later," Zhou Yi said. "What's not convenient about it? You dare to play this kind of trick in front of me? Hurry up and show yourself." With that, she waved her sleeves and a storm of magic power swept out. Li Mu instantly felt a chill all over his body. This demonic technique was naturally practical, but it couldn't resist too much external interference. It was more suitable for sneaking around. Once someone sensed it, they had to immediately use other countermeasures. Under this storm of magic power, he couldn't maintain his invisible state anymore. Although Li Mu escaped into the Demon Emperor's cave at the first moment, Zhou Yi still caught a glimpse of him before he fled in a panic. The scene that she tried so hard to forget once again appeared in her mind. Changle Palace. Mr. Mei walked in slowly and handed a letter to Zhou Yi. He said, "Your Majesty, this is what Li Mu asked me to give to your Majesty." Zhou Yi still hadn't recovered from the morning's events. Her gaze was a little absent-minded. She said, "Put it on the table." Mr. Mei shook his head and said strangely, "I don't know why he couldn't tell your Majesty face to face. He hurriedly handed this letter to me and left the palace." Zhou Yi suddenly raised her head and said nervously, "What, he left the palace?" She sensed and found that Li Mu's aura was indeed gone from the palace. However, Wan Wan and Xiaobai were still there. This made her feel at ease. As long as they were still there, Li Mu wasn't running away. She opened the letter. There were only 2 short lines on it. "Your Majesty, I need to go to Yingzhou to deal with the 10 demonic corpses. Then I'll go back to Mount Baiyun to attend Senior Xian Jizi's disciple recruitment ceremony. I'll return to the divine capital in a few days. Li Mu." For some reason, Zhou Qiong heaved a sigh of relief after reading the letter. He was still worried. When Li Mu came to Changle Palace later, should she pretend that nothing happened? Or should she pretend to be furious and reprimand him, and then let it go easily? If she pretended that nothing happened, what would he think? Would he think that she was an unreserved woman? If she pretended to be angry and reprimanded him fiercely, she would regret it even more if she hurt his feelings and made him want to leave. Compared to these 2 choices, it was obviously better to separate temporarily. After some time, both of them would forget about this matter and pretend that nothing had happened. At the same time that Zhou Yi breathed a sigh of relief in Changle Palace, Li Mu also breathed a long sigh of relief outside the divine capital. Although running away was shameful, it was useful. Otherwise, he really didn't know how to face the Empress. He didn't even know how to explain it. Although the Empress was already 30 years old, she was still a pure and innocent girl who hadn't seen the world. Li Mu was really worried that he would leave a psychological scar on her. He was even more worried that she would mistakenly think that he had some strange fetish. Suddenly, he didn't have the courage to step into Changle Palace. Rather than stay here and make things awkward for both of them, it was better to separate temporarily and let time wash away everything. He originally planned to find the corpse sect later and deal with the 10 demonic corpses. Now he had to bring it forward. At the Department of Offerings, the slovenly Taoist priest looked at Li Mu and frowned. What are you up to this time? Last time he followed Li Mu to the demonic emperor's cave. If he didn't come out, his talisman of divine fate would undoubtedly be gone. The slovenly Taoist priest only wanted to spend the year well, get the talisman of divine fate, and then continue to look for opportunities to break through. Li Mu, go to Yingzhou. The slovenly Taoist priest shook his head. No. That kind of place where even birds don't shit. What's the point of going to that, Li Mu? When we come back from Yingzhou, I'll give you the talisman of divine fate. The slovenly Taoist priest stood up and asked, when do we leave? Li Mu, Tao. Several days later in the hinterland of Yingzhou. The sky here was gray and the air was filled with poisonous miasma. 2 figures stepped through the air and floated above a valley. The location of the corpse sect was very secretive. Even the demonic Dao only knew that they were in Yingzhou, but they didn't know the exact location of the corpse sect. However, to Li Mu, who had the memories of the 1,000 illusions, coming to the corpse sect was like going home. It wasn't just like home, it was home. The slovenly Taoist priest asked, you really don't want me to go with you? Li Mu shook his head and said, no need. He dragged the slovenly Taoist priest along just in case. With his current strength, if he encountered an enemy at the peak of the 6th realm, it would be difficult for him to escape. With the slovenly Taoist priest around, unless they encountered a 7th realm, there wouldn't be any accidents. After the death of the 1,000 illusions venerable master, there were no more 6th realm cultivators in the corpse sect. Although there were many 5th realm cultivators with the demonic emperor's cave and the Dao Bell, Li Mu could deal with them no matter how many 5th realm cultivators there were. His face changed and soon it was the face of a stranger. This person had a white face and was a young man. Li Mu had changed his appearance based on old Wang's. He left the slovenly Taoist priest and continued to fly forward for 10 miles, arriving in front of a mountain. Li Mu flew forward another 100 feet and suddenly, a few voices came from the mountain. Frem, this is not a place you can come to. I'll give you 10 breaths. If you don't scram, I'll extract your soul and refine your corpse. Li Mu's body floated in the air and he said calmly, how dare you? His voice was steady and powerful and it echoed throughout the mountain. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. One by one, figures flew out from the mountain. More than 10 figures floated in front of Li Mu, their faces filled with shock. These people were all 5th realm cultivators. Among the 10 demonic sects, the corpse sect's strength was only weaker than the sage sect's. If the Grand Elder, the 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master, reached the 7th realm, he could suppress the 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master and make the corpse sect the number 1 sect below the sage sect. Unfortunately, with the death of the 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master, the corpse sect was leaderless and became a demonic sect. A tall and thin man with a pale face like a corpse stared at Li Mu and asked, who are you? What business do you have in the corpse sect? Li Mu smiled and said, Qin Shi, we haven't seen each other for 3 years and you don't recognize me? Qin Shi's expression changed greatly. Although the person in front of him had a different appearance and voice, his expression, actions and even subtle eyes were exactly the same as the god in his heart, the Grand Elder 1,000 Illusions. You're the Grand Elder. Qin Shi blurted out and then said flatly, no, this is impossible. The Grand Elder's soul lamp has been extinguished. He can't be alive. The 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master's soul lamp had been extinguished, which meant that his soul had died long ago. It was impossible for him to appear in front of everyone. The soul lamp and life talisman were connected to the soul. Li Mu couldn't deceive the Nether Saint and now he couldn't deceive these people. He didn't deny it and said indifferently, the 1,000 Illusions Venerable Master is indeed dead. The one standing in front of you now is my memory host. I have erased the memory of his original body. Now I am him and he is me. Hearing this, everyone in the soul sect was shocked. Erasing someone else's memory and replacing it with his own. How crazy was he to do such a thing? In this way, who was the identity of the person whose memory was erased? If he was himself, he only had the memory of another person. But if he was 1,000 Illusions, he had nothing but 1,000 Illusions memory. How could the corpse sect treat him as the Grand Elder? Qin Shi looked at Li Mu and said in a low voice, what evidence do you have? Li Mu said indifferently, Qin Shi, how dare you talk to me like this? Have you forgotten who picked you up from the pile of corpses and taught you how to cultivate and refine corpses? After saying this, he looked at another person and said, Han Shirsan, what's with that look? Don't think that I don't know about you and the female corpse you refined. Sun Qi has already told everyone about it. Han Shirsan's face was red. Looking at the other person, he gritted his teeth and said, Sun Qi, didn't you say you would keep it a secret for me? Sun Qi looked embarrassed and said, I accidentally let it slip. Li Mu continued, Sun Qi, once when Han Shirsan wasn't around, you secretly did something indescribable with his female corpse. All these years I didn't tell anyone. Han Shirsan was furious. What? Sun Qi, you bastard. I thought you were my brother, but you did something worse than a beast. Sun Qi retorted, if I'm worse than a beast, then what are you? Seeing that the two were about to fight over a spirit corpse, Qin Shi said in a low voice, shut up, we'll talk about this later. He looked at Li Mu. At this moment he didn't have any doubts about what Li Mu said. If he didn't have the head elder's memories, how could he find this place and know everything about the corpse sect? Even so, he still couldn't accept such a special existence. He looked at Li Mu and said, you said it yourself, you're not the head elder. You only have the head elder's memories. The head elder of the corpse sect is already dead. Go back to where you came from, Li Mu sighed and said regretfully. If that's the case, then the 10,000-year-old ancient corpses I found can only be refined slowly after I establish the new corpse sect. I wonder if the 2 level 8 ancient corpses can be refined into 2 spirit corpses. Hearing this, everyone in the corpse sect was shocked. What? Level 8 ancient corpse. This is a supreme grade material. I wonder if it's a male or a female. If I can refine a spirit corpse in this lifetime, I can die without regrets, Li Mu said indifferently and turned to leave. In the next moment, an urgent voice came from behind him. Hold on. Qin Shi looked at Li Mu with a burning gaze and asked, can you let us see those ancient corpses? Li Mu waved his hand and 10 demon corpses were placed neatly in front of everyone. Everyone looked at these demon corpses and after a short silence they were completely shocked. Oh my god, the corpse still has such a strong aura after being dead for so long. He must have been a level 8 powerhouse when he was alive. These 2 corpses are both level 8, and the remaining ones are no lower than level 7. Where did you find these supreme grade ancient corpses? My hands are starting to itch. I want one of these 2 level 8 ancient corpses. Bullshit, that's mine. Then let's see if you have the ability. Want to fight? Looking at the corpse sect disciples arguing endlessly, Li Mu waved his hand again, and the 10 demon corpses were recalled by him. He looked at the group of corpse sect disciples and said indifferently, have you seen enough? The crowd's noise came to an abrupt end. Their gazes met and soon, everyone had a decision in their eyes. In the next moment, with Qin Shi in the lead, everyone cupped their fists and bowed at the same time, saying loudly, all corpse sect disciples welcome the return of the head elder. Chapter 419. Greetings, Grand Elder. Greetings, Grand Elder. Dozens of corpse sect disciples stood on the mountain peak and bowed to Li Mu. Li Mu's gaze was indifferent as he said indifferently, your words have enlightened me. I'm not Qian Huan, I only obtained his memories. The corpse sect has nothing to do with me and you have nothing to do with me. From today onwards you are you and I am me. I have nothing to do with you. Plop. Hearing this, the dozens of corpse sect disciples directly knelt on the ground. Grand Elder, you can't abandon us. The corpse sect can't do without the Grand Elder. You've obtained the Grand Elder's inheritance, you're our Grand Elder. Please forgive our offense just now, Grand Elder. To the corpse sect disciples, it didn't matter whether the person in front of them was Qian Huan or not. It didn't matter whether he had obtained Qian Huan's memories. No matter who it was, to be able to give them 2 level 8 ancient corpses and 8 level 7 ancient corpses, he was the corpse sect's Grand Elder. Even if Grand Elder Qian Huan was still alive, he wouldn't be able to give them so much. As a corpse refiner, what could be more exciting than personally refining a spirit corpse? Not to mention the person in front of them had Grand Elder Qian Huan's memories. He was more qualified than anyone to become the corpse sect's Grand Elder. Li Mu's expression eased as he said indifferently, stand up and speak. The purpose of his words just now was to establish his authority, not to draw a clear line between him and the corpse sect. If he left the corpse sect, Where would he find the materials needed to refine corpses and these professional workers who didn't ask for anything in return? After subduing these people, Li Mu could rest assured and leave them to others. Seeing Li Mu's expression ease, the corpse sect disciples knew that the Grand Elder had forgiven them. They all relaxed and started to get closer to Li Mu. Grand Elder's cultivation is profound. He'll rule the 10 continents for thousands of years. Under Grand Elder's leadership, the corpse sect will surpass the sacred sect sooner or later and become the leader of the 10 sects. Grand Elder, where did you find these ancient corpses? Li Mu raised his hand and the crowd stopped talking abruptly. He glanced at the crowd and said, "These 10 ancient corpses are the key to the rise of the corpse sect. No one is allowed to leak this information, not even the sage sect or the other sections. If anyone violates this rule, they will be severely punished." As his voice fell, an extremely powerful aura emanated from his body. This aura swept out and the people of the corpse sect felt an extreme pressure from the bottom of their hearts. From the very beginning, everyone could feel that the person who called himself the Great Elder was not even at the 6th realm. This was also the reason why they were unwilling to acknowledge him. It was only because of the 10 precious ancient corpses that they temporarily compromised. At this moment, under this imposing aura, they felt as if they were seeing the Great Elder come back to life. There was no doubt that the new First Elder was also an absolute powerhouse. After recovering from his shock, Han 13 patted his chest and promised, "Rest assured, Great Elder. If anyone dares to leak this information, I, Han 13, will be the first to extract his soul and refine his corpse. We are members of the corpse sect in life and we will die as corpses of the corpse sect. We will follow the orders of the Great Elder." Yes, Great Elder. Although Qian Huan was dead, his prestige in the hearts of the people of the corpse sect was extremely high. Li Mu only used a little trick and easily inherited his position in the corpse sect. The entire corpse sect of the demonic path was the inheritance that Qian Huan left to him. Li Mu took this as Qian Huan possessing Old Wang as compensation for hurting his feelings. Of course, he was also very clear that the reason why the attitude of the people of the corpse sect changed so much was because of the 10 corpses. To a certain extent, the disciples of the corpse sect were all artists. They treated refining corpses as art. It was their art that was not understood by the world. Li Mu released the 10 corpses once again. The people of the corpse sect looked at them, their faces flushed red and their breathing quickened. Li Mu looked at them and said, "I still have important matters to attend to and can't stay in the corpse sect. I will leave these corpses to you. I hope you won't disappoint me." Han 13 licked his lips and said, "Rest assured, Great Elder. With these corpses, the rise of our corpse sect is just around the corner." For the next 3 days, Li Mu stayed in the corpse sect. Refining ordinary corpses was very different from refining corpses of this level. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, he personally guided the people of the corpse sect and set up the corpse refining formation. He also confirmed a few important steps with them before he left with peace of mind. These 10 corpses required a lot of materials to refine. It would completely exhaust the wealth of the corpse sect, but no one cared. If they ran out of materials, they could save them up again. Corpses of this level were rare. Long before he came to the Ying continent, Li Mu had used a secret technique to refine these corpses once. This refinement could ensure that no matter how strong they were after they were refined, they would not have their own independent consciousness and could be controlled by Li Mu. In this way, even if the disciples of the corpse sect had other ideas in the future, they would not be able to cause too much trouble. When they left the Ying continent, the sloppy Taoist priest looked at Li Mu with a strange expression and said, "Kid, you have guts. It has always been the demonic Dao who has ideas about others. You are the first one who dares to do this to them." Li Mu did not say anything. He waved his hand and a golden light flew out and was caught by the sloppy Taoist priest. The sloppy old Daoist priest glanced at him. "It's still early for a year." Li Mu said, "From now on, Senior is free." When he had tried to rope in the sloppy Taoist priest, it was only to intimidate the Department of Worship. Now the Department of Worship no longer needed his intimidation. Li Mu also did not need to force him to stay. The lifelong pursuit of an expert of this level was to find that glimmer of hope to transcend. If he stayed in the Department of Worship and became a pawn of the imperial court, it would be very difficult for him to find his own Dao. Back then he had enlightened Li Mu and it was not something that could be repaid with a mere 800 coins. Take this heavenly secret talisman as a token of gratitude for his guidance. The sloppy Taoist priest held the heavenly secret talisman with a look of admiration and said, "If talisman Daozi did not beat me to it, I would really want to take you as my disciple." Li Mu smiled and cupped his hands. "I wish Senior to step into the Transcendence Great Tao as soon as possible." The sloppy Taoist priest waved his hand and said, "I also wish you to enter the bridal chamber as soon as possible and become the mother of the world." He took a last look at Li Mu before his body turned into a stream of light and disappeared into the horizon. Li Mu floated in the void alone and sighed in his heart. He had already taken all the shortcuts in his cultivation. How could it be so easy to step into the Zhou Xian? As for dominating the world, it was even more impossible. The 10 continents and 3 islands were vast and boundless. Although everyone knew that the 7th realm was the peak, no one knew if there were 8th and 9th realms in some secret places. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and stopped thinking about these things. He had to take one step at a time. Thinking about these things too early was not good for his cultivation. He identified the direction and flew towards the northwest. A few days later on Mount Baiyun. In the Taoist palace on the main peak, Xianxia said in surprise, "Junior brother, didn't you say that you would come in a few days? Why are you here so early?" Li Mu said, "I have nothing to do in the imperial court, so I came a few days earlier." The real reason was that he was hiding from the Empress. This time he had lost a lot of face in front of the Empress. He did not even bring Wanwan and Xiaobai and fled. He had to at least wait until the end of the apprenticeship ceremony and wait until the Empress had completely forgotten about that matter before he appeared in front of her. Xianxia smiled and said, "You came back just in time. Qing just came out of seclusion yesterday." Li Qing's cultivation was originally at the 4th realm. In the past 2 months, under the cultivation of the Fulu school, her cultivation was already at the peak of the 4th realm. She was only 1 step away from the 5th realm. This small step did not rely on seclusion but on chance. Lu Hanyan and Yu Zhenzi were traveling outside. Li Mu held Li Qing's hand and strolled around Mount Baiyun. The two of them met up with Han Zhe and talked about the days when they were constables in Yangqiu County. Seeing Li Qing reminiscing, Li Mu suggested that the two of them go back to the county yamen to have a look. At Qingxian Peak, Han Zhe looked at the two of them leaving inside. He said, "Junior sister Li still benefited that guy in the end. So what if he's good-looking? Just because he's good-looking he can marry too." Junior sister Qin stood beside him and snorted softly. She said, "Are you still not giving up on senior sister Li?" Han Zhe shook his head and said, "How can that be? As early as 2 years ago when she rejected me, I gave up on her. Besides, she and Li Mu are both my friends. How can I still have such feelings for her?" Junior sister Qin raised her eyebrows. "Really? Really?" Han Zhe let out a long sigh and said, "Junior sister Li is like a flower in the mirror, the moon in the water. Instead of pursuing these illusory things, it's better to cherish the person in front of you. Li Si told me this a long time ago. I actually only understood it now." Junior sister Qin pursed her lips and combed the hair in front of her forehead. She asked, You're finally enlightened." Han Zhe rolled his eyes at her and said, "I'm not stupid." Junior sister Qin asked, "How do you plan to cherish the person in front of you?" Han Zhe suddenly looked at her with burning eyes. Junior sister Qin's face turned red. She clasped her hands together and looked down at her toes. Han Zhe said, "Junior sister Qin, I have something to say to you for a long time. I don't know if you're willing to." Junior sister Qin said without hesitation, "I'm willing." Han Zhe said happily, "Then help me ask senior sister Zheng if she's willing to be my Dao companion." Junior sister Qin lowered her head. After a long silence she raised her head and said with a smile, "Okay." She flew back to the mountain gate and came to the female disciple's residence. She knocked on a door. A female disciple opened the door and asked doubtfully, "Junior sister Qin, what's the matter?" Junior sister Qin looked at her and said, "Senior sister Zheng, senior brother Han asked me to pass on a message to you." The female disciple asked, "What message?" Junior martial sister Qin said, "He said that you have an oval face, no breasts, no buttocks, and you have a terrible temper. Whoever becomes your Dao companion will have 8 lifetimes of bad luck." 15 minutes later. Han Zhe, whose face was bruised and his clothes were full of holes, sat on the ground in a sorry state. He looked up at the sky and asked loudly, "Why? Why did you do this to me? Is it wrong to like someone?" Junior sister Qin used the spiritual liquid to help him heal the bruises on his face. She shook her head and said, "This is a good thing. It let you see senior sister Zheng's temper in advance. If you two become Dao companions in the future and she treats you like this every day, it will be too late for you to regret it." Hanja thought carefully and nodded. "You seem to be right." Junior sister Qin smiled and said, "Of course. You're my only family in this world. How can I lie to you? Next time if you like any senior sister, tell me. I'll help you confess." Hanja waved his hand and said, "Forget it. I've thought it through. Women will only affect my cultivation speed. I'll cultivate wholeheartedly in the future." Junior sister Qin looked at him with a smile and said, "Then I'll accompany you, Xianxia County." The county government. There were not many familiar faces in the place where Li Mu and Li Qing used to work together. In the former duty room, Constable Zhou looked at their tightly held hands and said with a smile, "I knew it. I knew it." The cultivators in the government office had changed again and again. Most of the constables had changed. Only Constable Zhou remained the same. The county government office was still the same, but Li Mu and Li Qing were not the same as before. After chatting with Constable Zhou for a while, the two walked out of the county government office and walked on the street hand in hand. In 2 years, the noodle stall that Li Qing liked to eat the most no longer had the same taste as before. Some of the familiar shops along the street were more ostentatious. Some had changed their business because of poor management. Roast chicken, crispy outside and tender inside. Roast chicken only costs 10 copper coins. 20 copper coins for 3, 100 copper coins for 12. Walking on the street, Li Mu suddenly smelled a tempting fragrance. He and Li Qing looked at the corner of the street at the same time. Li Qing said in surprise, "It's them." At the corner of the street, a middle-aged couple stood in front of a temporary stall and shouted loudly. The middle-aged couple was short and ugly. However, the roasted chicken they were selling had a tempting aroma that whetted one's appetite with just a sniff. Because of that, their business was very good. The customers in front of the stall had already formed a long line. In Li Mu's eyes, they were not a middle-aged couple but two weasels. After 2 years, Li Mu and Li Qing met the weasel couple again. There were many customers. Although the two monsters were in a hurry, their faces were full of joy. "We don't have any more today. Please come again tomorrow. I'm really sorry. We'll definitely prepare a few more tomorrow." Sorry. Come here tomorrow to buy roast chicken. We'll give you a bowl of chicken soup for free." The weasel couple sold the last roast chicken and put away the stall. They had a happy expression on their faces. If they maintained this business, they would be able to buy a small house here in half a year at most. Suddenly, the weasel seemed to have sensed something and looked forward. A young man and woman were holding hands. They waved at them and then turned to leave. The weasel was stunned for a moment. Then joy appeared on his face. He subconsciously wanted to chase after them but was stopped by the woman beside him. The woman shook her head and said, "Don't disturb them." The weasel looked forward again. What he was looking at was a painting, then the two figures were the most beautiful colors in the painting. They were so beautiful that one could not bear to destroy them. The weasel took a step forward and retracted his steps. If it were not for them, the couple would have been destroyed in body and soul. The weasel couple knelt down and kowtowed a few times in the direction where the two figures disappeared, ignoring the surprised eyes of the passers-by on the street. Seeing the weasel couple's current appearance, Li Mu was very gratified. They had helped each other in difficult times and grew old together. These two demons had lived the life that Li Mu wanted. What he longed for was not status or power. It was enough for him to be able to do what he loved with the person he loved. He held Li Qing's hand tightly and took her into the flask space. The two stood by the lake. Li Mu looked at Li Qing, who was shocked by the scenery in front of her, and said softly, "This is where we will live in the future." Li Qing came back to her senses after a long time. Li Mu took her to the row of lakeside houses and said, "You can live in whichever one you like in the future." Li Qing thought for a moment and pointed to an exquisite small building with a flower garden in front of the courtyard. She said, "I like this one. P.S. You can follow my WX public account, not Rong Xiaorong. I made a map of the world of Great Zhou myself. It is not easy to find the Easter egg after it is posted. I will post it on the public account at the same time. The public account will also update the character designs and so on. It will be easier to find it in the future." Chapter 420. Li Mu looked at the exquisite building with a flower bed and was speechless for a moment. This building was built by the Empress for herself. Every beam, every piece of wood, and every blade of grass in the flower bed were all made by the Empress. If she came here in the future and saw that someone had taken over her home, Li Mu couldn't imagine how furious she would be. One was his superior who loved and protected him, the other was his beloved woman. Li Mu's heart was in a dilemma as to which side to lean towards. Angering the Empress wouldn't end well. No one knew this better than Li Mu. But Li Mu didn't want his beloved woman to be sad. Li Qing saw his strange expression and asked, "What's wrong? Is this building not okay?" Li Mu's throat moved. He shook his head and said, "It's not that it's not okay. It's just that I suddenly want to build a house with you. A house that we built with our own hands, a house that belongs to us. Every structure of the house will be designed by us. We can also open a small garden in front of the house and plant the flowers we like in the garden." Li Qing imagined the scene that Li Mu described. Her beautiful face showed that she was moved. Compared to this small building in front of her, being able to build a house of love with the person she loved was obviously more meaningful. She nodded her head and said, "Okay." Li Mu wiped away the cold sweat on his forehead and said, "Let's go. Let's go prepare the materials to build the house." 3 days later, Mount Baiyin. There was still some time before the disciple recruitment ceremony. Li Qing once again entered seclusion. Xianxia had exchanged a top-grade medicinal pill from the Pill Cauldron sect, which could help her completely cross the last barrier between the divine ability and the creation realm. Li Mu also took advantage of his free time to cultivate in seclusion on Mount Baiyin. It was very difficult for his cultivation of Dao to improve in a short period of time. His cultivation of Buddhism had also reached a bottleneck. Li Mu put most of his energy into learning demonic arts. Every path of cultivation had its own strengths and weaknesses. The more one dabbled in, the more one would have their own strengths and fewer weaknesses. The various demonic techniques recorded in the demon race's heavenly book were extremely useful to Li Mu, and he began to think about the other heavenly books. Each of the 6 Daoist sects had a Dao page. It was very likely that the Buddhists had one as well. The demon race's heavenly book was in Li Mu's hands. The fox race's heavenly book was in the hands of the 10,000 Illusions Lord. The ghost Dao's heavenly book was nowhere to be found. The other heavenly books were also rarely found. Among the heavenly books, Li Mu came into contact with the other 5 sects of the Dao sect the easiest. However, even though the 6 sects were all part of the Dao sects, it was impossible for them to lend their sects' treasures to others to comprehend. Unless Li Mu hid his identity and became a core disciple of one of the sects, or participated in the various sects' disciple recruitment trials and obtained first place, none of these methods were realistic for Li Mu. Li Mu stopped thinking about these and continued to comprehend the demonic techniques. At a certain moment, a Fulu flew in from outside and landed in the courtyard. The Fulu flashed and Li Mu heard Xianxia's voice. "Junior brother, please make a trip to the main peak's Dao Palace." Xianxia must have called him for something. Li Mu left the small hut and quickly flew to the main peak. In the main peak's Dao Palace, other than Xianxia, there was also a woman. She looked to be in her 30s and her skin was delicate and tight. She was like a charming young married woman, but her cultivation was already at the 6th realm. Li Mu naturally wouldn't think that she was only in her 30s or 40s. This woman had the fragrance of elixirs. The people of the Danding sect had always paid attention to maintaining their appearance, and they didn't lack elixirs to retain their looks. This woman was also a first seat of the Danding sect, and her age wouldn't be much younger than Yuzhen. Li Mu walked into the Dao Palace and asked, "Senior brother, what's the matter?" Xianxia looked at the woman and introduced her to Li Mu. "This is fellow Daoist Xianxia of the Danding sect." Li Mu cupped his hands and said, "Greetings, fellow Daoist Xianxia." Xianxia returned the greeting and said, "Greetings, fellow Daoist Lingjizi." Xianxia said slowly, "To be honest, the only person in our sect who can refine the Tianji talisman is junior brother Lingjizi. This matter requires his approval." Although a trace of shock flashed through the depths of Xianxia's eyes, he didn't doubt Xianxia's words. He cupped his hands again and said to Li Mu, "Please, fellow Daoist Lingjizi." Li Mu was still confused and looked at Xianxia. Xianxia explained, "It's like this, a senior of the Danding sect." After listening to him, Li Mu understood why the Danding sect sent 2 first seats to Mount Baiyin. Other than congratulating Xianxia on finding a beloved disciple, they also had a request. A grand elder of the Danding sect was nearing the end of his life and hoped to ask for a Tianji talisman from the Fulu school to extend his lifespan by 10 more years. For Li Mu, this wasn't a big deal. At most it would take more effort. However, even blood brothers had to settle accounts. In the cultivation world, no one would ask for help like this. Li Mu looked at Xianxia and asked, "The materials for the Tianji talisman." Xianxia took the initiative and said, "The Danding sect will bear all the materials for the talisman." This was what they should bear. When Li Mu didn't know how to hint to her, Xianxia continued, "If the talisman is successful, we will also prepare a generous gift for the Fulu school." The one who had to bear the burden was Li Mu. He couldn't let Xianxia take advantage of him. Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "Actually, I'm also interested in alchemy." Xianxia immediately said, "I can give you a book on alchemy. The book contains the insights of the seniors of my sect on alchemy." Li Mu said, "I heard that the Danding sect's Dao page contains the truth of alchemy." Xianxia understood what he meant. After a moment of silence he said, "I can't make the decision on my own. I need to ask the sect master." Xianxia walked out of the Dao palace and quickly returned. He said, "Senior sister has agreed. If the Tianji talisman is successful, we can let fellow Daoist Ling Jizi study our Dao page once." This result was within Li Mu's expectations. Although the Dao page was a precious treasure of each sect, it wasn't that they never showed it to others. The Fulu school would let the first place in the talisman Dao trial to study the Dao page once. After they studied it, they could choose to join the sect or not. Li Mu chose to join while Zhou Xian chose to leave. The other 5 sects also had the same rule. The 6 sects had been passed down for thousands of years. Countless seniors of the sects had studied the Dao page and passed it down while innovating. What made the 6 sects what they were today was not the Dao page, but the hard work of generations of seniors of the sections. Therefore, borrowing the Danding sect's Dao page to study was not a matter of principle for the Danding sect. After receiving the Danding sect's promise, Li Mu cracked his knuckles and stretched his muscles. He said to Xianxia, "Senior brother, we can begin." Several days later, dark clouds gathered in the sky above White Cloud Mountain again, accompanied by a strong heavenly might. After experiencing it once, the elders and disciples of White Cloud Mountain were used to it. They already knew that the appearance of this kind of heavenly phenomenon on White Cloud Mountain meant the birth of a saint-level Fulu. Wasn't it normal for a saint-level Fulu to be born in the ancestral court of Fulu school? Soon the first seats flew towards the thunderclouds. Not long after, the thunderclouds dissipated and the sky returned to normal. In the Daoist palace on the main peak, Hyun Jinko handed the divine secret talisman to Xianxia. Xianxia carefully accepted it and cupped his hands. "Thank you, Daoist Xianxia, Daoist Ling Jizi." Then she stretched out her hand and a blank page appeared in her palm. Li Mu's cultivation was no longer the same as before. In addition, before he wrote the talisman, the Pill Cauldron sect had given him a lot of elixirs to recover his magic power and mind. At this moment he was in a good state. Li Mu took the page and sat down cross-legged. When his mind touched the page, it immediately sank into another space. What entered his eyes was a familiar fog. Li Mu did not delay. He closed his eyes and began to recite the clear heart mantra over and over again. He did not know how many times he recited it. When he opened his eyes, the fog in front of him had disappeared. In a desolate and broken world, there was scorched earth everywhere. Countless giant beasts were wreaking havoc on the ground. In the distance, countless figures stood in the air. Countless streams of light flew out from their hands. The streams of light streaked past Li Mu's eyes. He could vaguely see that there were round pills in the light. A pill flew into the middle of a few giant beasts and exploded. A black hole appeared at the spot where the pill exploded. The giant beasts were instantly sucked into the black hole and disappeared. A pill flew into the mouth of a giant beast. The giant beast roared and fell to the ground powerlessly. Soon it turned into stone. Some pills exploded, turning into flames that could not be extinguished. Some pills touched the giant beast and turned into blue ice. Li Mu had seen a similar scene in the Fulu school's Dao page. The difference was that those people could draw talismans in the air, but these humans used pills as weapons to attack these giant beasts. They would also throw some pills into their mouths. They seemed to be used to recover their spiritual power. A pill flew in from afar and passed through Li Mu's body. A piece of information suddenly appeared in Li Mu's mind. After realizing what this was, Li Mu reached out and grabbed another pill that flew in front of him. The pill passed through his palm and Li Mu grabbed nothing but air. However, a new piece of information appeared in his mind. The pill cauldron sex Dao page was someone else's after all. There was only one chance to comprehend it. Li Mu flew into the crowd and touched the pills up close. Pieces of information about the Dao of alchemy flowed into Li Mu's mind. In the Dao palace, Xianxia instinctively sensed that something was wrong. He looked puzzled. Xianxia smiled and asked, "What's wrong, Daoist Xianxia?" Xianxia said, "Comprehending the Dao page requires a lot of mental energy. Daoist Lingjizi's cultivation is not high, but he can persist for so long." Xianxia looked at him and said meaningfully, "Although my junior brother's cultivation is limited, his mental state is abnormally firm. Even I admire him." At a certain moment, Li Mu, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes. He stood up and returned the Dao page to Xianxia. He said, "Thank you." Xianxia put away the Dao page and asked, "How much did Daoist Lingjizi comprehend?" Li Mu said humbly, "A little, a little." Chapter 421. With the experience of comprehending the Fulu Dao page last time, Li Mu had learned to keep a low profile. He had said that he was just going to take a look, but in the end, Li Mu had inherited everything that the Danding sect had inherited from the Dao page. What the Danding sect had not comprehended from the Dao page, Li Mu had also secretly learned. It was no exaggeration to say that the current him could already use his knowledge of alchemy to establish a second Danding sect. It was just that there was no need to do so. Hearing Li Mu say that he had only comprehended a little, Xianxia was finally relieved. After all, the Dao page was an item of the sect's inheritance. If it were not for the fact that they had a favor to ask of the Fulu school this time, they definitely would not have taken the Dao page out to trade. Xianxia put away the Tianji talisman and the Dao page and quickly left. Xianxia looked at Li Mu and asked, "Junior brother, how much have you comprehended from the Danding sect's inheritance?" Li Mu shrugged and said, "I can swear to the heavenly Dao that it really is only a little." Xianxia thought to himself that perhaps he was overthinking. It was already rare for him to have such talent in the Dao of talismans and the Dao of Dao. Wanting him to also have such high attainments in alchemy was a bit too much. At this time, Li Mu looked at Xianxia with shining eyes and asked, "Senior brother, can you borrow the Dao pages of the other 4 sects to take a look?" Xianxia shook his head and said, "I'm afraid not. If it's just the Danding sect, we can still use your interest in alchemy as an excuse. If we use the same excuse for all the other sects, it would seem that we have ulterior motives." Xianxia's words made sense. The Fulu school had its own Dao page. If they wanted to take it for free, they obviously had bad intentions. The various Daoist sects might think that the Fulu school had the ambition of swallowing up the 5 sections. Although all the sects had this idea, thinking and doing were 2 different things. In the next few days, Li Mu began to digest the knowledge of alchemy he had obtained from the Dao page. Cultivators generally believed that the function of pills was to gather the essence of spiritual objects in the world. After consuming it, it could increase one's magic power and heal injuries. However, this understanding was obviously narrow. From what Li Mu had seen, the cultivators of ancient times mostly used pills as weapons. Just like the Fulu school's Fulu, they could greatly increase one's battle prowess. Unfortunately, the Dan Cauldron sect did not pass down those powerful pill treasures. The Pill Cauldron school was very sincere. After letting Li Mu comprehend the Dao page, they also gave him an alchemy book and an alchemy furnace. The Book of Alchemy was not precious. It was an entry-level book in the world of cultivation. The 6 Daoist sects were very generous. They did not forbid the circulation of some basic Fu pills and formations. Instead, they supported it. This was also the reason why the Daoist sects had grown so rapidly in the past few hundred years. Unlike the other sects, Taoism was more willing to share. Of course, the core secrets of the Daoist sects were only known to the upper echelons and core disciples. The alchemy book that the Pill Cauldron school gave Li Mu was only an entry-level book. What was truly precious was the annotations in the alchemy book. This would allow Li Mu to avoid many detours. After asking Xianxia for some spiritual herbs, Li Mu began to try refining pills. At first he failed a few furnaces. However, when he discovered that the art of tranquility could also be used to refine pills, his success rate greatly increased. Although writing talismans and refining pills were two different things, there were similarities. One required one to control the talisman's magic power, while the other required one to control the temperature of the flames. If one's mind wavered, the fu would be destroyed. Similarly, if one's magic power wavered, the flames would become unstable and the pills in the cauldron would be destroyed. During this period, Li Mu used the materials given to him by Xianxia to practice on Mount Baiyin. After a few days, when he returned to the divine capital and joined forces with the Empress, he might have a chance to refine a saint-level pill. Half a month later, the Fulu School's headmaster Xianxia and elder Yuzenzi's apprenticeship ceremony was held as scheduled. This was a rare occasion for the Fulu School in recent years. The other 5 sects of Taoism, the major subsects of the Fulu School, and some reputable sects in the cultivation world all sent people to Mount Baiyun to congratulate them. The names of Li Qing and Lu Hanyan were also known by the major sects in the cultivation world. As the direct disciples of the Fulu School's headmaster and great elder, their futures were limitless. It could even be said that the future of the Fulu School rested on their shoulders. In these few days, the 2 girls received so many gifts that their hands went soft. Li Mu purposely built a few more rooms in the cave to store the gifts they received. Inside the cave, Lu Hanyan stood by the lake and sighed. "What a beautiful place." Li Mu said, "This will be our home from now on." Lu Hanyan looked at Li Mu and asked, "I heard little sister Qing say that the 2 of you personally built a small building here?" Li Mu immediately said, "At that time you were outside. I originally planned to build one here when you came back." Lu Hanyan waved her hand and said, "I'm too lazy to build one. The small buildings here are all good. I'll just pick one." As soon as she finished speaking, Li Mu's heart skipped a beat. He pretended not to care at all and said, "Then you can choose whatever you want." Lu Hanyan walked around the lake and sized up the small buildings. Li Mu walked to her side and suggested, "What do you think of this one? It's facing south and has the best feng shui." Lu Hanyan shook her head and said, "I don't like this one." Li Mu continued, "What about this one? The terrace outside is so good. You can usually play the zither on it." Lu Hanyan continued to shake her head and said, "It's mediocre and has no characteristics." When passing by another small building, Li Mu quickened his pace and glanced around. He thought to himself, "Please don't choose this one, please don't choose this one." Lu Hanyan stopped and pointed to an exquisite small building with a flower garden. She said, "This one." Li Mu stopped and said with a smile, "Actually, I think it's more meaningful for the 2 of us to build a love house with our own hands." Lu Hanyan said, "But I really like this small building. Look at how beautiful it is. It's like a palace and there's a small flower garden in front of it." Li Mu's throat moved. He said, "We can copy this small building and build an identical." Lu Hanyan asked, "Since we already have one, why do we have to build another one?" Li Mu said, "This is different. Don't you want to have a small building built by the 2 of us?" Lu Hanyan said indifferently, "No need to be so troublesome. There's no difference anyway." Li Mu looked at her and said helplessly, "Why are you so unromantic?" Lu Hanyan frowned and said, "Are you saying that I'm not as romantic as Sister Qing? As expected, when there's a new person you forget the old. Do you think that I can't compare to her in any way?" Li Mu hurriedly explained, "It's not like that. Actually it's..." Lu Hanyan asked angrily, "What is it?" "Actually, this small building belongs to Her Majesty the Empress." "Her Majesty the Empress? Why is Her Majesty the Empress small building in our house?" Yes. Why are you hesitating? Is it because... No wonder you ran to the palace when we were not at home and didn't even go home. No wonder Her Majesty is so good to you. No wonder the rumors say that you are Empress Li. It turns out that what they said is true." After deducing for a while, Li Mu shook his head and threw these thoughts out of his mind. He could never say that to Lu Hanyan, otherwise things would become more difficult to end. Lu Hanyan was still waiting for Li Mu's answer. She asked, "Why are you shaking your head? Why don't you let me choose this one?" Li Mu raised his head and explained, "Because Qing and I built this small building by ourselves. I'm worried that if you don't have it you will think that I'm biased." "I see." Lu Hanyan held Li Mu's hand and said, "Don't worry. I won't think too much. I don't want to be so troublesome." She held Li Mu's hand and walked into the small building. After looking around the small building, she was more satisfied. It's so beautiful inside. This bed is so big. It's so comfortable to lie down. The tables and chairs here are also made of spiritual wood. The carvings on them are so exquisite. They must be the work of a famous artist. The paintings on the wall, are they the original works of Dao Xian from the previous dynasty? Most of his paintings have been lost. Where did you find them? These two vases are also so beautiful. They must be expensive. Li Mu stood in the room and squeezed out a smile. He said, as long as you like it. Xian Jizi and Yuzhen Zi's disciple recruitment ceremony ended. Li Mu stayed for a few more days before returning to Chengdu. Lu Hanyan and Li Qing did not return. In the following days they would receive the true inheritance of Fulu School. This was the most important opportunity for them to enter the 6th realm and even the 7th realm. After returning to Chengdu, Li Mu stayed at home for 2 days to make sufficient preparations before going to the palace. At the entrance of Chang'an Palace, he nervously asked Shangguan Li, "Is Her Majesty here?" Shangguan Li nodded and said, "Her Majesty is reading a book. You can go in by yourself." Li Mu walked into Chang'an Palace and saw the Empress reclining on the dragon throne. He said softly, "Your Majesty." The Empress's face was hidden behind the book. She said lightly, "Wait for me to finish reading this page." She read this page for a full quarter of an hour. Li Mu saw that she was holding the book upside down but did not dare to remind her. After a long time she put down the book and stood up. She asked, "What's the result of the trip to Yingzhou?" Li Mu said, "I have successfully gained the trust of Corpse Sect and had them refine the 10 demonic corpses for me." The Empress asked, "Aren't you afraid that they will use them against you after they refine them?" Li Mu explained, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. I have already used the spirit-splitting technique to deal with the 10 demonic corpses. No matter who refine them, they will only listen to my command." After that, the Empress asked him some questions about the apprenticeship ceremony. However, she didn't mention a single word about Li Mu's streaking in the Chang'an Palace. If she did not mention it, Li Mu would not take the initiative to mention it either. The two of them reached a tacit understanding about this matter. After the tacit understanding, the Empress said lightly, "Take me to your cave. I want to see my flower garden." Chapter 422. If Li Mu was really guilty, he was willing to accept the punishment of the Great Zhou Law, rather than face this kind of scene every day. The Empress's small building was occupied by Lu Hanyan. She slept on the Empress's bed and even picked the Empress's flowers. How was Li Mu going to explain this to the Empress? In Chang'an Palace, Zhou Yi saw that Li Mu was still standing in the same place and said, "Still not opening the door?" Li Mu let out a sigh. With a thought, he appeared in the cave. The Empress's figure also appeared by his side. Zhou Yi was just about to go to his own small building when he found that it was different from the last time he was here. There were 2 more small buildings by the lake. One was unique and elegant, the other was grand and imposing. The grand and imposing building looked like a smaller version of Chang'an Palace at first glance. It immediately attracted Zhou Yi's attention. Although it was called a small building, it was actually more like a palace. Carved railings, painted rafters and jade tiles flew. It was particularly conspicuous among the row of small buildings. There was a unique and luxurious air. There were flower beds on both sides of the front of the palace, and a winding path led to a secluded place. In the left flower bed there was a small pavilion. In the pavilion there were stone chairs and stone tables. In the right flower bed there was an ancient tree with a green shade. There was a swing hanging down. The swing was not a simple piece of wood but an exquisite chair. The chair was carved with hollow patterns. At a glance, one could tell that a lot of effort had been put into it. At first glance, Zhou Yi fell in love with this building. Li Mu secretly glanced at the Empress's expression. He was slightly relieved. Striking while the iron was hot, he said, "Your Majesty, I built this for you." Zhou Yi was surprised. "For me?" Li Mu nodded. "Your Majesty's status is so noble. Only this small building can show Your Majesty's status. Your Majesty, please go inside and take a look." Zhou Yi's eyes revealed a satisfied expression. He nodded and said, "Then let's take a look." The two of them walked along the small path in the middle of the flower bed, and entered this 3-story building. Li Mu introduced everything to the Empress one by one. "This room is His Majesty's bedchamber. The bedchamber doesn't need to be too big, otherwise His Majesty won't be able to sleep well. This is a leisure area. In the future, Your Majesty can play chess or cards with Wan Wan and Xiao Bai here. This is the kitchen. The area next to it is the dining area. After introducing the first floor, the two of them went to the second floor. The second floor was very spacious with only a large hall. Li Mu continued, Your Majesty can use this as a place for seclusion. There are soundproof talismans on all 4 walls as well as the upper and lower walls. If you cultivate here, you definitely won't be disturbed. Then the two of them went up to the 3rd floor. On the 3rd floor, Li Mu had built a swimming pool. At the front of the pool was a balcony that led outside the room. Li Mu said, This is a place to take a bath. Before Your Majesty goes to bed at night, you can take a bath here. It will help you sleep. The balcony outside overlooks the lake. You can also lie there and watch the clouds. For this small building, Li Mu had put in a lot of effort. Standing on the balcony of the 3rd floor, he looked at the Empress and asked, Is Your Majesty satisfied with this place? Zhou Yi nodded and said, Not bad. You are very considerate. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said, As long as Your Majesty likes it. Zhou Yi continued, Okay, now let's go to my small building and have a look. Li Mu's expression froze and he asked, That small building, does Your Majesty still want it? Zhou Yi said, That was built by me. Of course I want it. Li Mu wiped his forehead and said, I thought that with this place Your Majesty would not want that building, so I took the initiative to sleep there for one night. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. Zhou Yi rolled her eyes at him and asked, You have your own place. Why did you sleep in my place? Li Mu explained, Your Majesty, it is because I like Your Majesty's small building very much. Zhou Yi waved her hand and said, Forget it. Since you like it, I will give it to you. I will go and see my flowers. Li Mu breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, Your Majesty, please. A moment later, in the flower bed in front of the small building, Zhou Yi frowned, pointed to a corner of the flower bed and asked, There is a peony missing here. Who picked it? She also noticed that a peony was missing. Li Mu said nervously, I was careless. Zhou Yi looked at Li Mu, her brows gradually relaxed, but in the end she did not say anything. She walked out of the flower bed and said, This small building and flower bed, I will give them to you. Take good care of the flower bed. There is a painting in the building that I want to take away. As for the rest, I will give them to you. She walked into the room and stretched out her hand. The painting on the wall floated down and automatically rolled up into her hand. Although Lu Hanyan also liked this painting, but in the future when she asked, Li Mu could say that the Empress lent it to him. In order to make it more believable, he turned to ask the Empress, Your Majesty, what is the mystery of this painting? Zhou Yi said, This is the authentic work of the previous dynasty's master painter, Daoist. He entered the Dao through painting. In this painting there is his painting inheritance. Unfortunately, after the painting was cut off, no one could comprehend it. Li Mu remembered this reason. In the future when Lu Hanyan asked, he would say that the Empress lent it to him to comprehend the painting. Like Taoism and Buddhism, the school of painting was once a cultivation school. However, their lineage had been severed and they had completely disappeared. Until now, the successors of legalism, the school of the military, and Confucianism would occasionally appear, but there was no trace of the successor of the school of painting. Li Mu did not care about this. He had to take a closer look at this painting so that when he explained it to Lu Hanyan in the future, it would be more believable. Before the Empress put it away, Li Mu said, Your Majesty, can you let me take a look at this painting? Zhou Yi asked, This painting has been hanging here for so long, have you not seen it? Li Mu said, I only gave it a few glances. Zhou Yi did not say anything else. He stretched out his hand and the painting automatically flew up and unfolded once again. Li Mu looked at the painting scroll. This was the first time he looked at this painting carefully. This was actually an ink landscape painting. There were not many elements in the painting. Distant mountains, near water, a lone boat, and standing at the bow of the boat was an old man wearing a straw raincoat. Li Mu did not know much about painting. He could only tell that although this painting was simple, it gave people an extremely spacious and distant feeling. However, if he were to say that he comprehended anything from the painting, that was really not the slightest bit. No matter how he looked at it, it was just an ordinary and mediocre landscape painting. Generally speaking, when his heart was the most peaceful, his comprehension was the strongest. Li Mu habitually chanted the clear heart incantation. When he looked at the painting again, he could not help but be shocked. Usually when he was upset, he would chant the clear heart incantation to calm his heart and qi. However, this time after he chanted the clear heart incantation, the painting in his eyes became distorted. With just a casual glance, Li Mu felt dazzled. Accompanying this was a wave of dizziness. The more he chanted the clear heart incantation, the more distorted the painting became. In the end, he could only see balls of swirling ink. Li Mu felt that his soul was also swirling. In the next instant he appeared in a boundless world. Green mountains, clear water, and a lone boat. He stood at the stern of the boat. An old man wearing a straw raincoat stood at the bow of the boat with his back facing him. The old man held a paintbrush in his hand. When Li Mu looked over, the paintbrush moved. The old man held the paintbrush and his wrist moved quickly. It seemed that he was painting in the void. A ball of ink appeared in the air. It seemed to be a swimming fish. The old man's last stroke touched the fish's eye. The fish shook its tail and jumped into the water. The old man's paintbrush continued to move. After a while, a crane twisted its neck and let out a crisp cry. It flapped its wings and flew into the sky. The old man drew a mountain peak with a few strokes. The mountain peak flew into the distance and became a huge mountain peak. The huge mountain peak fell into the water and set off huge waves. It was as if it was going to capsize the small boat. The old man at the bow of the boat continued to draw. He drew a pair of wings. These wings appeared behind him. With two flaps, the old man's body left the boat and flew into the sky. But a huge wave came and capsized the small boat. Li Mu fell into the water. In the next moment he appeared in the Empress's small house again. The painting floated quietly in the air. In the painting there was still a mountain far away, near the water, a lone boat and an old man. Recalling the scene in the illusion, Li Mu was dumbfounded. With just a brush he could create something out of nothing. Was this the power of a painter? While Li Mu was shocked, Zhou Yi had already walked to the bedside. She turned around and asked Li Mu, "Have you slept here before?" Li Mu nodded and said, "Yes." Zhou Yi bent down and sniffed lightly. Her eyes narrowed and she said, "You are lying to me. This is not your smell." Li Mu opened his mouth and explained, "This?" Zhou Yi said coldly, "Think carefully before you speak. You should know what the punishment is for the crime of deceiving the Empress." Li Mu said helplessly, "In addition to me, my wife has also slept here." Zhou Yi sniffed again and indeed smelled the scents of two people. One was Lu Hanyan's and the other was Li Mu's. The two scents were mixed together. In other words, the two of them had occupied her house and slept in her bed. Perhaps Li Mu had even picked a flower from her garden and put it on another woman's head. Zhou Qiang found it hard to imagine what they had done on this bed. She closed her eyes and said, "You can go. I want to be alone for a while." Li Mu sighed. What should come finally came. He wanted to explain, but he did not know what to say. In the end he could only cup his hands and say, "I will take my leave." As his voice fell, his figure disappeared in an instant. Zhou Yi walked out of the small building, walked to the lakeside and sat down with her hands on her knees. By the lakeside a few fish swam around carefreely. When two of the fish swam in front of her, they suddenly stopped and then began to peck each other. Zhou Yi was inexplicably angry. She picked up a stone and threw it into the water. Splash! The stone fell into the water and splashed. The two fish were startled and separated, swimming in different directions. Zhou Yi coldly snorted, "Who asked you to kiss again?" Chapter 423. When Li Mu left the cave he realized that it was his place. But the Empress took it, so be it. She was the Empress and he was the one who didn't care about morality. It was only right for him to take a step back. Li Mu had some thoughts about the painting, but he wasn't in the mood to think about it. The Empress wanted to be alone and Xiao Bai and Wanwan were playing somewhere. He had nothing to do, so he took a stroll on the street. Unknowingly he walked to the Shindu Yamen. Inside the Luoyang Yamen, Wang Wu saw a familiar figure and stood up immediately. He asked in surprise and joy, "Sir Li, what brings you here?" Li Mu asked, "Is Li Si here?" Wang Wu nodded. "Yes, he's in the back office. I'll go inform him now." Li Mu waved his hand and said, "Do what you need to do. I'll go find him myself." The Shindu Yamen was Li Si's territory now. Li Si was at the peak of his life. His career and family were both successful. No one would have thought that a small constable in Yangqiu County would have such a position in just 2 years. It was lunchtime. Li Mu picked a restaurant and drank a few cups with Li Si. After 3 rounds of wine, Li Si asked casually, "Where's the boss and Miss Han Yen?" Li Mu said, "They're at Mount Bai Yun. They still have some important things to do." Li Mu wanted to drink to drown his sorrows, but the bitter wine made him even more sorrowful. He put down the cup and looked at Li Si again. "I want to ask you something on behalf of a friend." Li Si glanced at him and took a sip of wine. "Speak." Li Mu thought for a moment and said, "This friend of mine did something wrong and hurt another friend of his. He doesn't know how to ask for her forgiveness now." After listening to Li Mu's description, Li Si asked, "Your friend and your friend's friend are the 2 you mentioned last time, right?" Li Mu nodded. "That's right." Li Si said, "It's been so long. I thought they were already together. Why are they still friends?" Li Mu explained, "It's not the kind of relationship you think." Li Si asked, "If it's not that kind of relationship, would they be together every day and night and even live together?" Li Mu said, "It's because of work." Li Si took a sip of wine and said, "Can't you just end the working relationship as soon as possible? If this continues, won't they be annoyed?" Li Mu shook his head and said, "It's not what you think. My friend has a family." Li Si retorted, "When you had a family, weren't you also with the boss? Is that different?" "What's different? Is she married?" "Not really." "Then what are you afraid of?" "They're not like what you think." "You're not him." "How do you know?" Li Si thought for a moment and said, "How about this? From now on, if you're that friend of yours, imagine if that woman gets married. How would you feel?" Li Mu suddenly woke up. Imagine if the Empress had an Empress and concubines. How would he feel? Damn it, if he didn't think about it he wouldn't know. Now that he thought about it, Li Mu realized that he had such a strong desire to possess the Empress. Of course he didn't want to possess her body. He wanted to be loved by her. He didn't want to share the Empress's love with a second person. He didn't want a second person to be with her every day. He didn't want her to get hurt for a second person. She even sent her avatar and left the divine capital to save him. The Empress was so good to him, but he became arrogant and hurt the Empress. Thinking about it, it was too much. Li Mu stood up and said, "Drink by yourself. I'll leave first." After leaving the restaurant, Li Mu first used a sound transmission magic treasure to contact Lu Hanyan and Li Qing, who were far away in the North County. He told them which small building in the cave belonged to the Empress. As for the reason, he explained it very clearly. Becoming the Empress of the Great Zhou wasn't her intention. When the Emperor Qi in the ancestral temple condensed and the Great Zhou had a new emperor, she would retire. She would grow grass and flowers and become their neighbor as an ordinary woman. Different from Li Mu's deduction, Lu Hanyan didn't blame him and didn't make trouble for no reason. Instead, she asked Li Mu to apologize to the Empress on her behalf. This way, Li Mu only needed to obtain the Empress's forgiveness. He slowly sighed and walked toward the palace gate. Changel Palace. Zhou Yi sat on the dragon throne, but she wasn't in the mood to read. Mr. Mei saw that the Empress was unhappy. He stood quietly to the side and didn't say anything. Zhou Yi didn't say much. She snorted and asked, "Mei Wei, what's the punishment for deceiving the Empress according to the law?" Mr. Mei said softly, "Your Majesty, the punishment for deceiving the Empress is execution according to the law." She raised her head and said, "I don't know who is so bold. I'll have someone catch him and bring him back for questioning." Zhou Yi said angrily, "He." She only said one word, then she was discouraged. She shook her head and said, "Forget it." Mr. Mei thought for a moment and asked, "Did Li Mu make your Majesty angry again?" Hearing someone mention it, Zhou Yi felt wronged again. She couldn't help but say, "He gave away the small building I built in my flower garden to others. He even lied to me. Don't you think I should punish him?" Mr. Mei was also angry after hearing this. He said, "You should. Your Majesty is so nice to him. This bastard dared to do this to your Majesty. I'll catch him and give him 100 beatings." Zhou Yi hesitated and said, "You don't have to punish him so severely, do you?" Mr. Mei said, "He should be taught a lesson." Zhou Yi sighed and said, "Forget it. I'm not related to him. It's normal for him to be nice to his wife." Mr. Mei was even more indignant. He said loudly, "Your Majesty is so nice to him. You dote on him and protect him. When the tributes from the counties arrived, he was the first one you thought of. This is how he repaid your Majesty. No, I can't take this lying down. If I don't teach him a lesson, I'll be ashamed of myself and your Majesty." At this time Shangguanli walked in and said, "Your Majesty, Li Mu wants to see you." Lord Mei said coldly, "Let him wait outside for 2 hours before coming in." Zhou Yi hesitated. She was about to speak when she said firmly, "Your Majesty, you can't protect him this time." Zhou Yi thought for a while and nodded. She sat on the dragon throne with a hesitant expression. After a few minutes she looked outside the hall and said, "Come in." Mr. Mei looked helpless, but he could only watch Li Mu walk into the hall. She looked at Li Mu fiercely and asked, "How dare you come here?" Li Mu ignored Mr. Mei and looked at the Empress. He bowed and said, "Your Majesty, I'm guilty." Zhou Yi looked surprised. She coughed and put on a dignified expression. She asked, "What are you guilty of?" Li Mu said sincerely, "I shouldn't have lied to Your Majesty. I shouldn't have slept in Your Majesty's pavilion without Your Majesty's permission. Please punish me, Your Majesty." Mr. Mei snorted and said, "The crime of lying to the Empress is punishable by death. Do you think a small punishment can make up for your crime?" Zhou Yi stood up from the dragon throne and said lightly, "It's good that you know you're wrong. Just don't do it again." Lord Mei stared blankly at the Empress with a blank expression. Li Mu bowed and said, "Thank you, Your Majesty." Soon Li Mu, Shangguanli and Mr. Mei walked out of the Changle Palace together. Li Mu turned to Mr. Mei as soon as he stepped out of the gate. He said with disappointment, "Sister Mei, I called you sister so many times. How could you treat me like this in front of Her Majesty? You disappoint me." Li Mu shook his head and left. Mr. Mei stood there for a long time. Then he turned to look at Shangguanli and said seriously, "I swear if I say another word I'll be a dog."